meeting. Those in the public gallery, good to see such a good turnout. So yeah, for those who stay throughout the course of the day, yeah, hopefully you have the opportunity to see how things operate. I'll just open with karakia. Tuia karunga, tuia kararo, tuia karoto, tuia kawaho, tuia tātou te tangata, ki te kaupapa o te hui nei, ki te kaupapa o te rangi nei, Māori ora, kia tātou katoa. Apologies, I don't think we have any. So everyone's either in attendance in person or on Zoom. We'll now move to the public forum. So we have 4 people registered to speak. And just for clarification, the way the public forum works, so there's a public forum at all, both full council meetings and council committees. If you register, because we have a limited amount of time to work through each time, so people pre-register. If you're pre-registered, you can speak for up to 5 minutes as an individual, or 10 minutes if you are representing a group of people. So for anyone who wishes to speak in the public forum at any of those meetings, if you could please just register, and that just helps us manage the time and understand how our day is going to work. So some of you may wish to speak at a subsequent council meeting, and you'd go through Robin in the first instance, and she'll register you in the public forum. So today we have 4 people. I'll just work through in the order that they've been registered, and first up is Roger Jones. Morning, Roger. Morning. I'll give you a nod at 4.5 minutes if you're still talking.
What I presented in front of you there is an alternative to the Hope bypass. It's using the existing road, improving on it. It's called the 3-way system. It's used right through Australia, and I worked with it, used it for 24 years. It works very effective. In the morning, you've got the arches over the roads. That's where your traffic lights are. They also have cameras, which catch people with mobile phones, by the way. But it's in the morning, you have 2 lanes, continuous, uninterrupted, so no vehicles can pass over it, all the way from Burke's Bank right through to the roundabout near Mitre 10. In the afternoon, you simply reverse it so that it comes all the way back. Now, at the bottom of near the butchery, the other side of Queen Street, there's traffic lights there at the moment. They can go turn right. During the rush hour, that light would be red. So they'd have to come back around the roundabout to join in the traffic. It's called to join in the traffic. They have a wording, merge like a zip, and it works very effective. The only thing here is to do this, to build it, you would need to get overseas people from Australia to quote for it, because here they're too slow for one and too expensive for another. On the main highway, that would have to be 4 lanes, because at the moment it's neither here nor there. It's as I say, a simple system. Study it, it will work, and you've got the room. Okay.
Thanks very much, Roger. Really appreciate you coming in and speaking, and also the time and energy and effort that you've put into creating the model. So I'm sure people will. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Murray Dawson. Welcome, Murray. I think you probably know the deal, but 5 minutes, and I'll give you a nod at 4.5.
Morning, Mayor Tim, Chief Executive Janine, councillors and staff and others. I'm Murray Dawson. For some of you, it's like the good old days. Anyhow, you've got the 1 page there. I'll start with something I should have put on it, but I didn't. It's table 31D of the Resource Management Plan. It reads, this is when the dam's operational and it's for non-affiliates to the dam. It doesn't start on your sheet. But anyhow, this is what it says in the table. The values for all triggers are derived from the flow record of the Wairoa River at the Irvine site. Okay, so part A here. The site was active from 1958 to 1917. It's very, very valuable data. At 2017. 2017, they ceased using the site. I understand it was some dispute with the landowner, but I'm not sure of that. But the important point here is this still a lawful or legal to have a synthesised flow used in the resource management plan? So obviously that's something for your staff or legal people to look at, but I've posed it there as a question. They currently use the Roding, the Lee and the Upper Wairoa, and they synthesise it. I checked the overlap record when the older site was operational and the new one, the new 3 sites were amalgamated, and the discrepancy of about 10% at low flow. So anyhow, I don't think the site's suitable for the resource management plan. And the second part is this. I researched the land which borders the site, and you have a screen grab there in front of you. Unfortunately, there's a yellow strip didn't turn up. If you look at the top part where it butts out into the road, when you look at the screen, that's a separate yellow strip. It's about 2 metres wide and about 60 metres long. And it goes from the road to the stilling chamber, the measuring site. Surely it was intended for Tasman District Council staff to have access to that monitoring site. Now, I don't know the ins and outs. Actually, I do know some of the ins and outs. But it seems to me that TDC were a little too, did not assert sort of community rights in having access to that site. It's less than 100 square metres. You see the strip that it is. So what I would like to be assured of by this council, by the staff, is that TDC has pursued all legal options to gain access to that community infrastructure. That's my bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Murray. Appreciate you taking the time to come in, and we'll provide you some feedback on the question that you've asked. Next up, we have Sebastian Marinkovic.
I've got some copies of documentation that might be handy to me.
Yeah, good as gold. If you put them pass them to the ends, and we'll just pass them around.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Good as gold. So same deal. 5 minutes. I'll give you a nod at 4.5.
Yeah, good as gold. Thank you, Tim, Janine, Council. I have been asked to present the concerns and wishes of the community. These are regarding the Transport Choices projects and the walking and cycling strategy, which we're aware of and underway. The concerns and wishes of the community are documented in these forms. I'll refer to those shortly, as well as a letter from concerned residents of Tudor Street in Motueka and a letter of complaint regarding your consultation process or lack thereof. Actions proposals regarding our communities across the Tasman district. First, these forms express the will and wishes. Approximately 120 members of the community, as documented from the follow-up community meeting, which was held Sunday, the 17th of September in Upper Moutere, which you chose not to attend. From that, actually, can I have one of those sheets, please? Sorry. Got those sheets somewhere? Oh. Sorry, can I just grab one of them? No, not the letter. Yeah, those ones. Again, this was from the meeting in Upper Moutere. So we, the people and members of the Greater Tasman community, wish to express our will, severally and collectively, that we have lost confidence in our council and that we do not want the council to apply for any central government funding for the proposed infrastructure works, cycleways et al. Across the district. We wish for you to cease and desist all associated works and to not accept any funding for these projects. That was signed by approximately 120 people at the committee meeting. You'll also be aware of a survey that was conducted in Pahara of approximately 500 people expressing similar concerns and wishes. Secondly, I will summarise a letter from residents of Tudor Street and a high street business owner who have not been consulted with regarding these proposals. Just a summary. We live on Tudor Street and we strongly oppose these cycleway plans that you are trying to do on our street. We have had no consultation regarding this at all. Why are they, TDC, spending money we don't have? Why don't we get a pull for the community instead? We work on High Street. We are extremely concerned with this lack of consultation as a business owner. How about you start listening and working for your community, and with the cost of living crisis, clearly we do not need a cycleway. Finally, is a formal letter of complaint. This is addressed to Janine as the CEO. This letter includes so attached to this letter is an indicative proportional representation of the top 10 concerns and the top 10 wishes of the community for your reference. This was undertaken as part of the meeting of 23rd of August, I believe, that you were all invited to but chose not to join us. Finally, there was in reference to a letter which was sent to all of you as a council. It stated the following: it is clear the council's funding application should not be submitted to NCTA and no funding should be accepted. These infrastructure works are not requested nor sanctioned by the community. A number of questions were included, as well as a notice to cease and desist all council works until the community's questions had been addressed and answered, and that you attend the public meeting as organised for Sunday, the 17th of September. The letter concludes, I'm wary of time, so much I'd love to be able to talk.
You've still got 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Oh, okay. All right. So this letter also goes through a list of the concerns. Concerns range from the focus of and priorities during a cost of living crisis, the wastage and irresponsible fiscal management of TDC, a lack of care and due consideration for our local business communities, a lack of openness and transparency, a lack of consultation with affected parties, lack of consultation with interested parties, lack of a thorough economic assessment and or impact report on affected businesses, lack of interest and safety concerns identified by the community, lack of consideration for the elderly, physically challenged and families with young children, and specific safety concerns regarding them. Quite a big one here is lack of defining what problem you and the TDC are attempting to solve, and an ability to maintain existing infrastructure and where any future budget is going to come from to maintain what we're looking at adding to. The letter finishes with, I await your response to this formal letter of complaint. Time is of the essence. In the meantime, I expect you to stop with immediate effect all TDC and or outsourced works and applications, whether for funding from central government or otherwise, for these council works, until a full independent investigation has been undertaken. Further, it is clear the necessary and appropriate consultation process has not been adequately followed. As such, the consultation process for these council works proposals must now start back at the beginning. I think that pretty much summarises our concerns and where we're at.
Thank you. Perfectly timed presentation, right on 5 minutes. So you did very well to get through all of that in a lot of time. So I appreciate you taking the time to come in and speak on behalf of the people that have come along today. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for being on board.
And lastly, we have Graham Verco. Welcome, Graham. Same thing, 5 minutes. I'll give you a nod at 4.5.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, yeah. Yes, I've just come in this morning about a proposal to paint no stopping lines around Central Park Lane and Chesterfield Drive in Berryfield, and I've been involved with that particular development right from the start, right from the early planning days, and of one of the team that have actually put that project together. One of the things that we were very aware of in the planning stages of that particular area was the ability for people to get around either walking, cycling, using their cars, and of course the bus. We always knew there was a bus coming through Berryfield at some stage. And how we knew that is where the current bus park is outside Central Park, the Alioki Cafe and so on. We had to build that in a reinforced manner to make sure a bus could be accommodated. And but about a month ago, with about a day's notice, I became aware that council were coming down to paint no parking lines down the street. I was concerned again through the lack of consultation, but I was also concerned for the people who have now established businesses down there, because between themselves and myself, we've spent around $7 million establishing those businesses, with buying the land, the buildings, and fitting those buildings out. And what they rely on, they're very community-based. It's a very community-based area. They rely on the people that live around and within the subdivision. They rely on people who use all the cycleway networks to come in, pass through, or even those that live there that want to cycle. But they also rely on friends and family who want to come and join them in that area and enjoy the facilities, but they have to come by car. And I provided 18 car parks in there, although I wasn't required to provide those with the new parking provision. But I put 18 car parks in there, so I sacrificed an area that I could have built a rental on. And rather than rely on council car parks, we thought first and foremost we'll do ours, and then any overflow will be taken up by council. The reason apparently for the no parking lanes is that the buses can't go around the roundabout, so they can't come down Berryfield heading west, turn around, and then head back out to Lower Queen Street. I don't believe that's the case. I believe that buses can turn around there. And I certainly believe that buses can turn around there with some modification to the not so much the roundabout itself, but the surrounds, the traffic island, and possibly a little bit of curb and channel. Obviously there's a cost to that. But I believe that the cost to council for having the buses run around Chesterfield and up Central Park Lane is about $72,000 for the life of the contract, which is 9 years. And I'm led to believe through my association with civil contractors and roading engineers that the cost to actually modify that roundabout area, not the roundabout itself, would be significantly less than that. So I guess there's two reasons I oppose the no parking lines. One is there is an alternative. The other is the disruption, actually three reasons, is the disruption to those businesses that have just established down there, and the ability for people to come in and enjoy that area. People that are not necessarily coming in by bus or by bicycle or walking. And if you go down there at any time and talk to that tenant, you'll find it's actually become quite a destination area, along with the other shops and so on further down. So
coming up to 5 minutes.
Okay. Yep. So that was it. That was my opposition to the proposal to put the no stopping lines down through there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Graham. And you can anticipate a slightly amended recommendation from council staff, having had discussions with business owners, landowners in the area. So you can expect to see a slight alteration to the recommendation contained in the agenda, and councillors will have an opportunity to comment on that, obviously, when that one comes up.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for taking the time and coming in and speaking. Right, we'll move on to declarations of interest. We have none, thank you. So we'll now move on to the minutes. So the minutes of the 10th of August meeting. Someone prepared to move that they be received. Move Councillor Mailing, seconded Councillor Butler. All those in favour, please say aye. And then the confidential minutes from the same meeting. Move Councillor Kinnemont, seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right, so we'll move on with the agenda slightly amended, and we are breaking at 10:30. So we'll work towards that. Hopefully these first few items should be reasonably straightforward. So the first one is the wind down of the Māpua Waterfront Masterplan and Steering Group. David, welcome. I'll hand over to you if you take the report as read and any areas of emphasis or additions that you'd like to make, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Through the chair, I'll just, like I said, I'll just take it as read, and happy to have any discussion or clarifications, questions, what have you, if you've managed to take a read through it.
Okay, thanks, David. Open for questions, comments, moving and or seconding. Councillor Kinnemont.
As you can probably expect, I have a bit of a few questions for David. We have had discussions about this, and I'm concerned with what it looks like to the public, and that we went out and said we're going to have a steering group of made up of iwi and councillors, and because iwi couldn't resource that, the staff are saying that we'll stop that group and we'll go back to the way it was before, where iwi dealing directly with staff. That to me shows that there's some priority given to iwi, or something along those, not priority is not the right word, but it's sort of the reason for it to me is that they couldn't resource meet in the steering group, but they can still meet and talk to the staff. This still takes up resources either way. So I just wonder, can you elaborate on why they couldn't do that?
Yeah, yes, absolutely, Councillor. The issue was that the people who would deal with staff on a more working level, and the people who would staff at governance level, at this point are the same people. Their depth of resources just aren't there. And so while there was a willingness from the people that we work with on the iwi side of things to do both, it would be quite a conflict for them to sit both at governance and actually helping us create the plan. And their preference then was to actually just spend their time working with us to create the plan and let it go through the existing governance channels that are already in place.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got a couple more questions if I may be permitted. The original Māpua Waterfront Masterplan group is now looking to be, is recommended to be dissolved. At the last meeting there was an overwhelming support for that group to continue. Sorry, I'm overwhelming for support for that group continuing. So I have offered my services as an independent person to chair that and facilitate it, sorry. How would the council staff see that being part of this report and being part of actively being engaged with the new master plan group?
There are limits on, we can't prevent people in the community gathering to discuss various issues in their community. I think the intention of the paper was just to decouple that sort of more active management from staff, because it is currently facilitated by our reserves team. They produce minutes, they chair the meeting, they run all that work. And the intention was to basically terminate that, because the group has actually served largely its purpose. The bulk of the work in the Waterfront Area Masterplan has been successfully carried out, and the remaining items are being absorbed into the Māpua Masterplan. So from a strictly sort of staff point of view, that needs to switch over to the actual master plan group. But there's nothing to say that the Waterfront Area Masterplan working group couldn't continue to meet and provide us useful feedback, because the knowledge that they would have gathered as a cohesive group over the past 5 or 6 years is still very valuable.
Thank you. How do I delicately put this? In your report, and I quickly can't find the clause, I did write it down somewhere, that the staff would still engage with the governance group here, and in particular the councillors representing that Muteri Waimea ward area. Would the staff consider allowing or even recommend that the 3 ward councillors be given the opportunity to attend meetings with iwi and yourselves when you're discussing points with the master plan, saving another meeting that you'd be when you're discussing with iwi, therefore you get a complete feedback in one easy meeting.
Yeah, I have no issue with that. Absolutely. Yeah, as long as you don't intimidate them.
You're right. Thank you. I've finished.
I don't imagine Mike's going to be particularly intimidating. I haven't found him intimidating, so I suspect no one else will either. All right, thank you very much. Councillor Maru and then Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 quick questions, Dave, because it's something you said. So am I right in assuming that iwi's preference was to engage at a working level rather than a governance level? That was iwi's desire.
If they had to choose just one, they want to be at that working level. And again, because the people who are working with, the people who are available to fill both roles, that's where their passion is.
And then the other one is that when the discussion for the master plan process came up, I understood it as this was a template to work through the other settlements to do their own. Has this thinking now changed based on how this is done?
To you, Tim. No, absolutely. We just, excuse me, we want to get this formula right. So this is, we're not going to roll it out until we've got it right, but absolutely that's the intent. I think it's a really good model. It provides communities with a really good overview of everything that's going on. So that's definitely our intent. We just want to make sure we get this one right first. That's all, that we can roll it out properly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much through the chair. With respect to the waterfront working group, David, the report mentions on 4.1 that the recommendations have largely been implemented, with the exception of one. So have we produced kind of like a closeout document just so that we can demonstrate to those who have been involved in that group that the purpose for which they were set up for has been completed? So do we have that documented?
Not that I'm aware of, but that sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a good idea because, you know, groups all over the place get set up for a particular purpose, but we should close out that purpose and demonstrate what has been achieved and what's left. My second point is really just a comment around the Māpua Masterplan Steering Committee. I mean, I think that actually it's a really good idea that we've switched that back to be under the umbrella of the Strategy and Policy Committee. I mean, it's such an important piece of work for the district as a whole, actually, and for Māpua, that actually not just the ward councillors, but everybody around this table needs to be engaged and involved. So I support that. So, Mr. Chair, on that basis, I'm happy to,
Move the resolution.
that's it. Move the resolution.
Splendid. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Councillor Shellcrest. I was going with Dan, but we're trying to keep formal. So it's moved and seconded. Is there any further comments or questions? Councillor Kinnemont.
Just further on from what Councillor McKenzie was talking about, the original Māpua Masterplan Working Group looked at 3 or 4 areas, of which one has been sort of completed. It's still awaiting the outcome of rubbish bins, hoe, and repairs to a playground dinghy. So that's one of the 4 being completed. The other 3, I'd venture to suggest that Crossing Point through Good Ideas has not travelled anywhere, and that Waterfront Park can quite easily fall into the new master plan, as well as what we call colloquially Kite Park in the area, but is known more officially as remediated land. So I'd suggest that the report probably isn't 100% correct, but there is still a lot of work to be done, and that's only up to year 5 of what was a 10-year plan. And that's one that, the other one is that I was disappointed to find out that every training mayor and councillors that we're supposed to sign off on any projects that are still current. And I'm wondering if any of the older heads around this table have ever done this sort of thing before. So it's probably a question for David, and then the next one is probably for the mayor and the CEOs. What's the process for signing off on projects that have not been completed, that it's not been rolled over in a training?
Through the chair, Jenny McFarlane is here as well to potentially answer technicality issues like that. But to your first point, I think Councillor McKenzie said about creating that sort of wrap-up report for the Waterfront Area Masterplan is going to be really important to make sure that any lingering issues are explicitly included in the Māpua Masterplan and addressed. The big thing is we didn't want necessarily two lines of communication from council on the same issue, particularly around Crossing Point. But definitely take your point that there will be other things that may not actually be complete out of that 10-year plan. I'll just hand over to Jenny to talk about the other issue.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think what Councillor Kinnemans is referring to is there's a requirement in the Local Government Act that at the end of every triennium, any committees or subordinate decision-making bodies that council has set up are automatically disestablished under the Act unless council resolves otherwise. And sometimes a council might resolve to keep its district licensing committee or its regulatory committee going. So it's not that projects come to an end, it's just at the start of each triennium, council has to reset up its structure, and each new council will want to consider its governance structure and what kind of committees it wants. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does, but it creates more now. Sorry, if I just bear with me. Why wasn't this made clear to the working group at the time that it was going to be disbanded because the council didn't decided that it wasn't needed anymore? It hadn't done any work according to the Local Government Act.
I can put that down, I think, to my team, but I had a team of one at that point, one governance advisor, and we had prepared reports for council, which included the standing committees and various committees. But in my time here, what I've discovered is that there's quite a complex governance structure here with actually over 40 committees and groups that had been set up. And so there was no intention not to re-establish the group. It was simply that it wasn't formally included in those reports that went through council at the time. And these sorts of things are being addressed by my team now. But there's such a lot of work involved with doing the elections, with setting up the new council. It's a very busy time for council staff. So there's certainly no intention to close down that group. But since then, there was the proposal for the Masterplan Steering Committee. But now that's not going ahead, but that's due to EV resourcing rather than anything else.
I might just add to that through the chair, is that we realized that was probably not great. And so I think the reason why it's also included in this report, instead of us just saying, well, it officially doesn't exist anymore anyways, let's just, is because we had been treating it as if it had remained stood up. You know, the council staff were still going there, still engaging with the group. So in our minds, it was still ongoing. And so we were treating it in this report as if it had been re-stood up at the beginning of this triennium.
Okay, thank you. So the resolution has been moved and seconded. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Next up, we've got Jenny, seeing as you're there. Amendments to the delegations register. So this is contained on page 294.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll take the report as read and largely self-explanatory. It mainly deals with changes to position titles or new positions for staff. And whilst the register does state that if there is a change of title, if there's no major change to the role itself, the delegations transfer to that role. But we do have to follow a formal process. So every so often the register has to be brought back in terms of the statutory delegations, brought back to council to make sure that there's a formal process to hand those delegations over to the new position titles. So in some cases, it's just a very minor change of title. The rest of the report covers a minor change to council's policy on elected members' allowances and recovery of expenses to enable the chief operating officer or myself to be able to sign off those claims, because we have 22 elected members and 46 appointed members and directors. So as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of paperwork coming through. We want to make sure that we can process those claims quickly and efficiently. I did circulate a revised statutory delegations changes this week. Apologies for the late notice with that, but the reasons for that were we wanted to make sure there was alignment with earlier changes that council made this year to the use of the council seal. So the changes that council made earlier this year require the chief executive to apply the seal to any warrants issued to staff. So we just had to do a tidy up to make sure that within the delegations themselves, that appointments and warrants are dealt with through the chief executive. So we're just going through a review process with those. We are still waiting on this sector model or tool called local delegations. It's being revised by Simpson Grierson at the moment for the sector, particularly the statutory delegations. So at some point during this triennium, I'm hoping before the end of this year, but you never know, we will have a fully revised delegations to come to council and a further tidy up at that point. But I'll take any questions anyone may have.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. It's open for questions or moving and seconding. Councillor Kinnemont.
I'm going to have a good day today. Thank you for the report. I've got to question why a trainee building officer is going to get all this delegation to powers to inspect and license amusement devices. It's the name that comes through this a lot in this delegation, and just given the title, put a red flag up for me as a trainee getting all this delegation. Where to me, I would have thought a trainee was more sort of reporting to somebody else who had the delegation. So, can you explain the process for me?
I think Matt Feely is available on Zoom. He might be better able to comment on the structure of his team. Certainly in terms of things like amusement devices, that would be considered low risk, low level type of work.
Good morning. Through the chair. Yeah, the trainee officers are under some supervision throughout their time whilst training. So there will be times where they can go out and inspect without supervision. So it's just quite a long training session that they go through. So there will be supervision for some areas, and other areas they'll be competent but still trainees.
Councillor Cameron.
Sorry, Ian. A trainee building technical officer will have the power to process and grant application for building consent. What's your comments on that then?
Same issue. They will still be trainees, but they will be competent in some areas of the processing side of things, like with a residential one building, like a shed, fireplace. They won't be under supervision, but they will be still under supervision and training for the further competency levels that they go through.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Councillor Mailing and then Councillor Greening.
Well, I'm happy to move the report.
So it's been moved. Just before I come to Councillor Greening, is there a seconder? Seconded Councillor Dowler. So the resolution has been moved and seconded. Councillor Greening.
More an administrative question, really. You've noted that the delegation changes are a reflection of changes to titles. I'm not familiar in detail with those changes, so I have to ask the question, have the delegations been reassigned to a lower level of management and responsibility or not?
No, I don't believe that's the case. They're largely changes to titles. For example, in the consents area, we had a senior planner and a consents planner, but now we have more staff with more specialised roles. So it might be a consents planner subdivisions, or it might be a consents planner subdivision approvals, natural resources. So it's not really that they're at a different level in the organisation, but as the organisation grows, you do have to keep reviewing your delegations. And the idea of delegations is that they do sit as low as possible in the organisation in the interests of efficiency, that you don't have them all tied up at the top of the organisation. But no, that has not been my sense of this exercise. That it's about, I think when we get local delegations, there'll be an opportunity at that stage for managers to have a good look at their teams and where they want delegations, the level of delegations to sit, levels of authority at that point. But yeah, I can certainly recommend the changes.
Okay, that's the question I want to know, because I don't want to increase the risk of failure due to someone with a more junior role being given a delegation that maybe is outside of their normal auspice, I suppose. So that's the reason for the question. So you're saying there is no risk and it hasn't been delegated to a lower level?
I'm not saying there's no risk. it's up to individual managers to decide on where the delegations sit within their teams and to ensure that their teams are trained and competent in their roles.
So are you saying that the changes, there are material changes that change the risk?
No, I don't think that's what was said at all. I think the answer to your question was that there isn't no risk. Any degree of delegation carries some risk, but the key point of your question was, has this changed the delegation significantly altered the risk? And the answer that we got is no.
Yep, that's fine. I'm just
it's a very good question. No, I'm just trying to clarify. It was a very good question. And,
I appreciate your summary. I just want to make sure that the staff agree with you. That's all.
Jenny?
Yes, I agree with that. And I am undertaking a review of the delegations register, a review of warrants. So I will be looking and addressing these matters for council.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Greening. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, and through you, the chair. I guess people have to train somewhere, and it's always a good place to start, isn't it? And to be uffied and supported through your training process. And people do rise up when there's some responsibility put on their shoulders. But I do have a little concern around when that turns pear-shaped, and I wonder what data we have from our previous challenges that we've faced as a council where trainees haven't got it quite right, and pools spring to mind. But that aside, I guess my question is, at the start of each triennium, do we get to revisit what delegations look like and what that could look like for the next term?
Jenny?
There's no legal requirement to review the delegations register, but it is good practice, yes, for each triennium to have a discussion with council around delegations, particularly delegations at the high level, delegations to your committees. So I am preparing a report on that as well at some point, and delegations to senior staff. But generally the operational ones, most of them can be delegated from the Chief Executive, from the delegations that she holds. It's only the Resource Management Act and the Local Government Rating Act where the delegations have to come directly from council. Those being quite significant acts, of course. The reason that we haven't brought you the full register for review this triennium is because we're waiting for this sector-wide model where the work's being done to make sure that particularly those statutory delegations are all correct, legally reviewed, and not every council is doing things differently, but it is a policy decision for council itself as to where it wants those levels of authority to sit. So something will be coming before you. I would like it to happen before Christmas, but it might be early on in the year. It just depends when local delegations is released. I think Simpson Grierson are finishing their legal review at the end of this month. So that should speed things up a bit.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a key issue with the delegations for the trainees, and that's around not the inspect, but to inspect and approve. So the delegations you're asking for actually do give them the same delegation as everybody else on that list. And the example of the amusement devices, whilst that might be a low risk activity, I can assure you that if something goes wrong from a trainee inspector licensing and surveying that and something happens, it certainly won't be a low risk activity. So I see them as part of the process, but I hate if somebody has the role as a trainee, I don't see they have the power. They should have the power of delegation to approve it and sign off personally.
Matt, well, Jenny/Matt.
Through the chair. Yeah, it's all they are under supervision until they are competent in those areas. So they wouldn't go out there until they were competent, but they still remain a trainee, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I guess what you're saying is what you don't want is a delegations register, which is 100 pages, because every trainee has to be delegated to a specific thing that they're qualified for. And I imagine during the course of their training, right up until the last minute, effectively, they remain a trainee. Whereas at that point, they're entirely competent to sign off a whole lot of things, but they're still considered a trainee. So I guess it's
Yes.
trying to find the balance. I think the assurance we're looking for comes back to the question that was asked entirely correctly by Councillor Greening over what is the risk. And from what I understand from both Jenny and Matt, is that people are not signing off any, they are not competent to sign off. So a trainee will start with a very low level of sign off and on the lowest and lower risk. And as they progress through their training, that will step up. But to reflect that degree of complexity in the delegations register is just going to be unwieldy. So, I mean, to some degree, there's a trust that's required that the process through the Building Assurance Authority ensures that those risks are well managed. And obviously our key interest is to ensure that risk is well managed. That's the response we've got from council staff is they believe it is. I guess it's over to us to finally approve the delegation. The risk you run of not approving something is that it's less people who can sign things off. That's more challenges in the system. And we already know the system has got challenges to meet the timeframes and sign-offs around all sorts of activities that require building consenting.
And we have pretty robust or very robust training, supervision and audit plans. So everyone's aware of each other's competencies levels that they can sign off to. So.
And just one last question on the same line of risk and audit. So in terms of our building assurance capacity, are we under a audit process through, is it MB? Who assesses our processes and gives us the tick that enables us to remain a building assurance provider?
IANS, we get IANS accreditation.
So does that accreditation consider exactly the issues that have been raised by Councillor Greening, Councillor Walker and Councillor Maru in terms of who we get to sign off what and how our training processes work and the competencies required?
Yes, it does. It's everything's covered from processes to audits to everything we do is looked at, and once we if they're happy with what we're doing, then we retain our accreditation as we do now.
Okay, thank you. Does that for those who have raised what is a genuine concern over the risk, does the answer that's been provided give you some degree of further comfort? It doesn't have to, it's just a question. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, through the chair. Just for clarification, please, Matt, how often does that audit take place?
Through the chair, that IANS audit is every 2 years, but we do continual audits throughout the year or every year.
Okay, thank you. The resolution has been moved and seconded unless the mover wishes to have a right of reply. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? The resolution is carried. So we'll try and get through temporary road closure on Dovedale Hill, perhaps, before we finish. We'll break for the morning tea break. Jamie, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, councillors. I'm happy to take this report as read and take any questions.
Thank you, Jamie. Councillor Deputy Mayor Bryant, then Councillor Dowler. Oh my gosh, there's a list of questions. Maybe we won't get through before we get that.
Thank you, Mr.
Things you think are simple.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've read the report fully and I'm comfortable with the recommendation and would like to move the resolution.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for a seconder before I come to other speakers. Seconded Councillor Dowler, and you're also next to speak. Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie and then Councillor Butler.
Sorry, I usurped you, Councillor Butler. Thank you, through the chair. So this was discussed actually last night at the Dovedale Community Association meeting. Just one point that I'd like to clarify. They would really like to ensure that the road is graded after the rally takes place. So is there an assurance that that can occur?
Yeah, so what we do is before and after inspections, and if which is likely to happen if there's some movement of gravel or some damage to the surface, then that gets graded and the cost is charged back to the applicant. So yeah, I can assure you that that could happen.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Through the chair, Yeah, do you have any information about the car club, whether or not they have any sort of strategy to reduce their emissions by perhaps encouraging EVs to participate in the rally? I'm just, and you know, from the point of view of council too, I mean, I'd just like to think that we might look ahead to you know, a bit of a strategy about whether or not we actually continue to support high emitting rallies.
I don't have any information about that through the mayor. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. So I won't be supporting this for that reason. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I've been approached by probably one person, maybe two, around the issue of emissions and car rallies and how can council allow these road closures for what is deemed to be high emitting events, and also just generally, I guess, there's sort of implicit support for motor racing. And you know, I guess I just want to say this, I suppose, is that, you know, if we don't have good processes here, then we've sort of got nothing going on very, very much. And, you know, until there comes a time where council makes some decision around supporting motorsport and rallies and whatever, you know, it's pretty ad hoc to simply oppose a road closure. For me, to oppose a road closure for an event like this because of emissions, because if we're going to do that without any basis in our policy or you know, some position that we take as a council that we've consulted on, you know, to say that actually high emitting events or sports, we're going to not support them. You might have to think about the AMP show. There must be a heck of a lot of emissions of all the people that travel there and back, and maybe the boat races up the lake, or perhaps that, you know, opposing the Queen Street road closure application for the Santa Parade based on consumerism and all the landfill going to end up with at Christmas. So that's, for me, that's the reality of what we're in. So although there's disappointment from some about that we approve these road closures for the sport, it's a legal activity, and I think the whole business around emissions. So it's like I suppose it's like it just seems like an obvious, you know, car rally, terrible emissions just for the fun of it. Those are the things that have been expressed to me. But I just guess I want to express my discomfort about having some, I wouldn't say pressure, but some people concerned about us approving these events. But there's no basis in policy or position to say no, in fact, other than the principle, and which doesn't always make much sense if you think about the emissions that are caused in travel every day to work and back, which would far exceed this. And thank you for humouring me.
Well, you've saved me saying what I was going to say, which is along a very similar line, which you outlined beautifully. So I will I will leave it at that. And Councillor Kinnermont.
I've got a very short question. The residents of Pigeon Valley Road and Dovedale Road have all agreed to it. What's the benefit to the community around Pride? Are they be able to watch it for free, this car rally, or they have to pay for it, or what's it? You know, what's the wider? That's my question.
I'll try and answer that. I don't believe there's any entry fee or for spectators. I guess it's just one of those sort of recreational activities that sort of help the social cohesion of our community. It's yeah, it's quite a popular pastime in this region, and a lot of people seem to get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Thank you, Jamie. Good answer. All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? The resolution is carried. So we'll now break for 15 minutes or so for morning tea, and we'll reconvene just prior to 11. If you'd like to just focus your attention in this direction, we'll get back underway. So the next item on the agenda is going to be the Māori Ward determination. The report's in the name of Jenna. So I'll hand over, Jenna, to you to introduce the item.
Tēnā koutou, councillors. Happy to take the report as read. I've got nothing further to add or update you on.
Okay, thank you. So the report is comprehensive and somewhat self-explanatory. I will open it up to firstly questions and or if anyone is willing to move or second the resolution, I will also take that. Councillor Dowell.
Yeah, I do have a question actually. I've read this thing about 3 times and I still can't get my head around it. Number 4.5 on the report. To be eligible to stand for a Māori ward, a candidate must be a New Zealand citizen and their name must be on the parliamentary electoral roll anywhere in New Zealand. They do not need to reside in an area that they're standing for. It doesn't actually say that they have to be a Māori person.
Correct. But they must be, the nomination must be supported by 2 on the Māori electoral roll.
Read that, but okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Hill.
Through you, Chair. Kia ora, Jenna. Thank you, not just for your work on producing this report, but all of the effort that's gone in and behind in terms of the process, you know, around this over a number of years, I guess. I think in New Zealand we really highly value democracy. But one of the things we don't acknowledge so much is that democracy doesn't generate equity. And it's not difficult to find the evidence of that. And I think in our last government, central government, you know, equal numbers of men and women and culture and ethnicity represented more than ever through proactive means, the way that the Labour lists and the Green lists were generated. So generally, our democracy in New Zealand has generated the status quo decade after decade after decade. And, you know, apart from the ethical and moral matter, we're required to have iwi Māori involved in decision-making in council. And you might say at all levels. And I think having a Māori ward is one way of doing that. The other things that happen here at council around the appointments to the standing committees, so 3 appointments to those 3 standing committees, and to the full council. The meeting of the 3 mayors of the councils of Te Tau Ihu, top of the south, with the iwi chairs forum, CEOs of the 3 councils meeting with the general managers of the iwi trusts, GMs, meet with the GMs, CEs, whatever the title is there, they're variable. And we've got a number of forums that happen. So this is one role or one approach in terms of a suite of things that we're doing as a council to ensure that iwi Māori are involved in decision making, which is a legal requirement. So I'm just want to acknowledge too the barriers in the past for, you know, to generating Māori wards have been pretty terrible, really. The same approach around a poll can be generated if 5% of the community want that, was never applied to general wards. You know, I mean, that's a terrible thing. So, you know, I appreciate the change in the changes that have happened in terms of legislation recently that have made this a more equitable, I guess, possibility. Based on all of that, I'd like to move the resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I'm happy to second the resolution from the chair. Open for further comment, feedback or discussion. Councillor Kinnemont, then Councillor Maru and Councillor Walker.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank you, Jenna, for a very full and comprehensive report. It's magic. And also, while I'm thinking about it, I can also thank the staff for getting this into our big tin can well in advance of today's meeting. Following from Councillor Dowler's question about clause 4.5, so does this mean that Ngāti Porou, who's outside of this area, as long as he gets nominated by 2 Māori on electoral roll within Tasman, can take this role on?
That's a tricky question to answer in the way it's been asked. Because Ngāti Porou is an iwi concept. So any person, any Māori person living here generally has whakapapa that is mixed makeup. They can have connections to many iwi across Aotearoa. They can have English whakapapa, Scottish. People are mixtures that come to the table, and you, just like the councillors that sit around the table today, are your own mixture of your background and representation. And so I think you can't, this effectively acts just like councillors who are elected to stand. So where they come from and who they are as a person can be anything.
Okay, thanks, Jenna. Councillor Kinnemont.
One last question. Costs. I'm sorry, I didn't read what the costs were going to be for this role.
Through the chair, the costs associated with this role will be determined as part of the representation review process, which comes after this one, and is decided by the Electoral Commission.
So ultimately, the cost would be determined by the cost of running the council is determined by the Electoral Commission ultimately decides the framework, but the remuneration is decided by the Remuneration Authority. They provide a pool, and depending on the number of councillors, which will be decided through the representation review, the pool is divided accordingly. So this will be one thing that makes up the cost of however many number of representatives sit around the table post the overall representation review, of which this is only a part. So no one can give you a specific answer to the cost of this in isolation from the rest of the process.
So I'll just put forward a scenario then through you, Ms. Mayor. The pool now is split 12 ways. The pool in future is going to go 13 ways.
Depends on what you decide in the representation review. Correct. No, so to be clear, I don't get into a whole, but the mayor is determined over here. The pool is for the balance of councillor numbers, which is then divided by 13. And depending on the outcome of the representation review, that could be 12 councillors, 11, 14. That will be something that we determine over the course of this year in the overall representation review.
So my last thing through you, Mr. Mayor, is not a question, but maybe a statement. There's a likelihood that the councillors' governance table here are going to have a reduction in pay at the next triennium.
No, I don't think you can draw that conclusion until you know how many councillors there are and what the Remuneration Authority's pool is set at. Councillor Maru and then Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's been a soul-searching decision whether I support this or not, but I'm going to support the motion today, and thank you, Jenna, for your work. And it is around, certainly from my town, Matawaka is the source of what Māoridom was when I grew up there. And as far as I know, my dad never voted, so he'd be one of the few on the Māori wards. And the conversation we had earlier around the feedback that he would rather engage at a working level than a governance level at the Māpua Masterplan questions my buy-in for somebody who will commit to a governance role. So this would be the lowest paid job any of us have had around this table. And in terms of finding the right person is going to be difficult. But had there been a Māori seat in Tasman, my dad may have voted in those elections when he was alive. And so therein lies the challenge for me in terms of how do we get those people that are not engaged in local government to be engaged, and certainly for Māori. So thank you for your work, and very hard to see. You had asked me this 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't have supported it. And a lot of that's down to how you've worked through council and the work that you've done. So you can certainly take a lot of praise from that.
Thanks, Councillor Murray. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, through Chair. You guys all know that I was brought up in the far north. So I've had a Te Ao Māori lens that I've looked through most of my life with. And this has been an interesting dialogue that we've had through workshops and the material. So Jenna, thank you for what you've put in and for taking us on the hikoi on the journey to get to where we are today. My biggest concern, however, and I'll be the first to say that last week when we did Te Reo Māori Week, Language Week, I was out there weaving and I was out there singing waiata, and that does something for my soul. But what doesn't do something for my soul is that we're making a decision today, and again, we have not gone and consulted our community. So although I wear a Māori lens, I grieve that we haven't gone out. I don't know why we haven't gone out, but I do wonder the order of how we process things. So we're going to go out and do a representation review after we've made this decision. That does not sit well with me, even though I align and understand. And I even have tattoos to acknowledge my far north roots. So I just want to put that out there that I grieve the process that we go through when we don't take our communities with us on decision making. And as a voice for my community, I have to sit here today going, how do I answer that? Because it doesn't really align with who I am, but I have to represent my community, and you put me in a hard place when you don't take my community with me.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much, through the chair. And thank you, Jenna, for all the work you've done in the paper, which is a good paper. I guess I've just got one question, and I'm conscious of the fact that, you know, certainly in the media that I read, I see that Auckland City are going through this process at the moment. Kapiti are also going through this process, and both of those councils have put out an online poll to their community. So I'd just be interested in your response in terms of how you've concluded that that's not necessary for us here in Tasman.
Okay, let me walk through that a little bit. So if we start with our legal obligations, the Local Electoral Act is silent, and it leaves councils to determine what is appropriate in terms of making this decision. So what we did at the outset of the process, and we shared that with councillors, was what had the other councils done when the legislation was changed and a lot of Māori wards were considered in 2021. And a lot of them recognised that this was a decision that predominantly impacted Māori. And then because what you really need to understand is that the local government, or the Local Electoral Act, is very prescriptive in terms of the representation review, the representation arrangements review. And that ensures that there is equitable, fair, I think fair is the word they use, fair representation. And that's why there should be plus and minus 10% level of representation and stuff like that. So you can take a great deal of confidence that this decision to have Māori represented through a Māori ward only directly affects Māori on the Māori electoral roll. Everyone else who feels they might be impacted will be fairly considered through the representation review, which will be a full public process. So accepting the nature of the legislation, the nature of that, looking around Aotearoa in terms of, and also our councils here in Te Tauihu and their approach, we chose a consistent approach with the bulk. And so it's interesting to see Auckland and Kapiti doing it their way. They've made a decision based on, I guess, their perspective and their ability to make that decision. So that's the basis for our approach. I think I've answered the question. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a follow-up question to Councillor McKenzie, who and I did, excuse me, to talk about this. So do you see any benefit in having any sort of survey or poll? And we can't have a poll as I understand it, but potentially something for people to feedback, or what I'm concerned about is the wider community won't be aware of us making this decision, and will come out of the, like a bolt out of the blue. Where did that come from? Because we haven't sort of publicised this to any degree that I'm aware of. The publicity is going to be afterwards rather than before.
Okay, so because of the nature of representation arrangements and how the electoral rolls are structured, the wider community shouldn't be affected. They really should not be affected. How Māori are represented shouldn't affect them. So I'm going to be really black and white about that. There should really be a line drawn around anyone who feels like they might be impacted by this, unless they're on the Māori electoral roll or want to be, they're not impacted by this decision because of the other process that takes care of their representation. Because this was fundamental to Māori, and it's hard to reach out to communities at the best of times, we use the proxy of the iwi trusts to provide feedback on, you know, they are elected members for those Māori people that whakapapa to them. And so we use their advice and we have brought that to you.
Thank you. And thank you for your work on this matter, and thanks for your work and your time here. Really do appreciate that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bryant. Are there any Councillor Kinnemont?
Thank you. Thank you for your tolerance too, team. Page 282, clause 4.11 talks about the Local Government Electoral Legislation Act that was given royal assent in August 2023. The last sentence says that changes that relate to Māori representation in local government come into force on the 12th of October 2025. Can you give me a bit of a heads up on what some of those changes are, as to what there is in the way of, just because I'm wary as well that some people probably feel disenfranchised from what's happening. So we need to get back everybody on this journey. I just want to make sure that this journey fully encompasses not only Māori, but everybody else that is a ratepayer here.
Through the chair, the main changes that Act brings in, local governments are required to consider Māori representation as part of their representation review process, which is before they would. So that's the main change. There's no change for that.
Okay, any further people wish to speak? If not, before I come back to Councillor Hill for a right of reply. But I think this is clearly a very significant issue, and I think Jen has highlighted absolutely perfectly who it affects and why, and the fact that ultimately we can speak te reo, we can get tattoos, we can sing waiata, but that's actually about us. That's our conscious choice for something that we choose to do individually. And as was very nicely highlighted by Councillor Walker, it makes her feel better. She feels good, but that's about her. That's about us if we choose to do those things. This actually isn't about us individually. It's about providing an opportunity for other people to contribute to the democratic process. And I think Ben has outlined really clearly that ultimately you choose to be on the Māori ward, you choose to stand in that electorate, and that is your democratic participation. You don't get to also, and this is one of the flaws of the system, vote in the general wards. You don't get to be on both roles. You have to make a conscious choice that that is how you would like to participate in the democratic process. And on that basis, it doesn't really adversely impact or shouldn't have any effect on anybody else. The thing that could potentially is the wider representation review, and that's going to have all sorts of other challenges around representation in communities, and that is going to be probably a bigger decision, a much bigger decision in conversation with the wider community. So, look, I think the fact that we're considering making a conscious choice, that we are following Nelson and Mulvera, who had this in place for the previous election, and again, the world did not come to an end. It seemed to work reasonably well. I think even iwi and people who participate understand it's not the perfect answer. It's not ideal. It has all the flaws that democracy has. But it's just another tool in building relationships and working well with a critical part of our community, along with the many other discussions, processes and conversations that we have to have. So, and I'll just touch on the last point that was raised by Deputy Mayor Bryan about somehow this will come a bolt from the blue. Well, that's on us. We've all known about this conversation for years. Every community meeting you've been to for the last 3 years, you could have brought it up. Any conversation you had with anyone in the community, you could have brought it up. You could have engaged at whatever level with whoever you wanted. It hasn't been a secret. So that's on us. That's our job as representatives, is to spark those conversations in communities. And the fact that we may have chosen not to, well, that's, again, on us. I think the point that Jen has brought to us, the recommendations she's provided, the feedback, I actually think that if this is well supported by the council, the fact that we're not doing it because we have to, we're not doing it because we're being forced to by changes in legislation, which was a potential, I think the fact we're making a conscious, positive choice is a really good thing. So, look, I'm thoroughly in support of the recommendation. I understand that there will be people in the community that don't like it, but that's pretty standard for most of the decisions that we make. Yeah. So with that, I'll hand back to Councillor Hill for a right reply.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your, the way you've articulated that. And Jenna, I think your comments around who does it affect, on the money, really, as you really think about it. So then what is the opposition? What is the opposition actually about? And many councils have been down the road of the old legislation where you took the poll of 5%, and everyone goes no. So generally the majority of people, if you're part of the majority demographic in the country, usually tend not to vote for Māori, tend not to say yes. And that the evidence is there. I'm not making this up. I think in Nelson City, they've had two very, very competent Māori people stand for council. Huge governance experience over many, many years at a national level on a number of fronts, don't get a look in. So generally, don't want to make the headline, Catherine, but, generally Pākehā people don't tend to vote for Māori. And that's why if we go out and say, everyone will just go, oh no, and that's why the legislation was changed. And I've made a decision here about whether to be really frank about this or not. But that was why the legislation was changed, and so that a decision was made, it can be made at a governance level around how we do meet our legislative requirements. And it's not perfect, it's not equitable. A Māori ward has different aspects to it, to a general ward. So you can only vote for someone in the Māori ward if you're on the Māori electoral roll, which I am. And if I was to stand for my sins in the Golden Bay ward next election, and if this goes through and we have a Māori ward, I wouldn't be able to vote for myself. So then you've got to come off the Māori electoral roll, and you can only do that every 5 or 6 or 7 years or something. And so then if you're on the Māori electoral roll, should we decide yes here today, you get to vote for that one person in that one ward, if and the mayor. Whereas in most other people in their general wards will get a choice of people to vote for. The way that a general ward is reviewed, the way that a Māori ward is reviewed, they're different as well. So it ain't perfect, but it is one way of us continually building our ability to have Māori iwi involved in decision making. And the research is clear that when you've got a diverse group in terms of gender, ethnicity, ages, cultures, you get better decisions. And I think, if you look at us here now, and you look at decades past, all did a great job, but when you look at the shifts that are here, we are a more diverse council than we've been. And I'd never not want that. Yeah. And these are pretty, these are difficult and painful processes for Māori, actually, and they're exposing. And so I appreciate and will acknowledge what you have lived with through sort of working through this process and the way you've gone about it with us. Good up.
Thank you. I'll now put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? The resolution is carried. Thank you. Congratulations, Jenna. Right, the next item on the agenda is the traffic devices bylaw. So who's leading? Staff member?
Jamie and Mike.
Mike, Jamie, welcome.
Oh, that's.
Jamie, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and hello again, councillors. There are a couple of amendments that I just want to introduce, but before I do, I'll just cover off the fact that a lot of these proposed traffic control devices are things that have been, I guess, had their genesis in the walking and cycling strategy, which was, I guess, one of council's most supported strategies, I think, that I can recall. So when it was adopted in 2022, it had a very, very high degree of support. And following quite a significant consultation process. So I guess we're getting through the process of actually implementing things, and today is another part of that process. So the first specific amendment I want to introduce is at Berryfield bus route. So it's recommendation number 3 in the report. So we had in the report, I described the options that we've investigated, and option 3 was amending the shape of a roundabout there so that the bus can do a turn. Now, our initial design for that gave us an estimated cost of $120,000. We've been working with Richmond West, and we believe that together with them we can produce a much lower cost solution for that roundabout. So what I'd ask the council to approve today is an amended resolution shown on the board there, which is to approve a budget of $60,000 to enable us to work with Richmond West and implement what I think is probably a better solution for everybody, given the feedback we've received. The other minor amendment that I just want to talk about is on Pitfewer Road, the bus stop location shown in slide 71 in attachment 1. We've just, there was a mistake on the slide, and there is a revised diagram which shows the correct location of the bus stops there. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. So it's open for questions. Oh, tell me there are no questions. Great. Councillor Maru.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've got a couple, and hopefully, Jamie, you might have a heads up and cover them. So first one is, has there been any budgets in terms of the cost of ongoing maintenance for the work that's getting done? So I understand budget to build, but budget to maintain.
Yep, through the mayor. Some of the things that we're doing will have relatively low maintenance costs. In fact, most of them, and some of them will even have sort of a net benefit in the long term. For example, if we have an intersection like at Tudor Street, Wilkinson, where there's a huge wide area of seal and pavement that we must currently maintain, and if those are narrowed up somewhat, we no longer have to reseal and deal with pavement failures on some of those areas. So the short answer is yes, any maintenance costs are included in our overall program for the forthcoming LTP, but we don't expect them to be significant in the scheme of the council's road maintenance program.
And then if I can, so I guess the key bits is a lot of this is addressing safety. So this might be a long spent. So yesterday I spent some time in Richmond and watched how perceived safety of cyclists, scooters, motorised scooters, and pedestrians, I think they have perceived safety in Richmond. And for the fact where I saw a lady towing a bike carriage behind her bike, come around Cambridge Street, down Queen Street, across a pedestrian crossing, and then abuse a guy driving a Ranger because he didn't stop. She didn't stop. And so the safety stuff I'm seeing, I'm going, it may be safer in design, but I'm not sure it's safer in practice. And that's those two key intersections in Motueka is the bit I'm really struggling with, Jamie, in terms of the safety. And I know it's been modelled, and I know there's been experts that have peer reviewed it, but we also had a roundabout that was safe, that was then modified, that I still have some issues with. So bring me home with safety. I'm just struggling with it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's always an element of risk, with the nature of our roads. So the answer you've probably already heard is that the critical thing for pedestrian safety and cyclist safety is speed, or the speed of vehicles, and well-designed infrastructure where we have pedestrians and cyclists coming into conflict with vehicles, is that vehicles should not be able to travel any faster than 30 kilometres an hour. What we've found on installations to date, particularly on Salisbury Road, is the raised crossings that have gone in there have been very, very well received. We've spent a lot of time talking with the school. And in fact, one of the school principals who every morning operates the crossing. And yeah, they kind of initiated that part of our sort of pedestrian improvement program. And she's just amazed with how well it's worked. She feels that her students are so much safer now because of the changes we've made, and it's a huge relief for her. And we've also had really good feedback from the Champion Salisbury intersection. So regular users of those crossings seem to enjoy them, and have felt real benefit. And when we hear stories about people feeling better on our roads because of the changes we've made, that's what gives us confidence that the designs we're putting forward are the right ones and are actually achieving, what the strategy has said we want to achieve. So, built into that is a huge amount, like you say, of best practice design work and reviews, and and just the advice and designs that we're preparing are based on all of the best practice and scientific, information available.
Thanks, Jamie. It's probably a process question. So the work that's not in front of us in terms of the transport choices for Motueka to the west, I'm absolutely in support of. I think it's awesome. The Path Street stuff I'm comfortable with, the Thorpe Street, but there's a couple of intersections that I'm still not sure of. So I don't know when we decide the specifics, how we'll manage those. But if I can I just acknowledge the project team? So they've answered lots of silly questions, looked at a whole lot of different variations to what originally started. And doing a job that the strategy is there to do. So this is the hard part where we make a decision. So I just don't know how you're going to go through the individual bits.
There was a number of options. It all depends a bit on who moves what to start with, and also the option is for someone to move and with exclusions. So move and but exclude. Alternatively, if something moved that you don't agree with, then you can obviously move amendments to remove parts thereof. You couldn't move an amendment to stop the whole thing because that would be a direct negative. But if you want to excise certain parts, then so there's a number of ways of addressing it. So I think if you think carefully about which ones you are comfortable with and which ones you are not, and that may also be shared by other councillors from various parts of the district, then we can work through that in due course. But it isn't a either all or nothing kind of conversation. There are variations that you can work with. Councillor Walker and then Board Member Armstrong. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just a point of clarification, we can't vote against it because it's a negative. Can you explain?
No, you can vote against it. You
but
can't
pull the whole
so
thing
if
out.
If it was moved, you then can't move an amendment.
It's a direct negative.
To not, do you know what I mean? You can vote against it. You just can't move a subsequent motion that, or an amendment that effectively removes all of the projects, because that would be a direct negative to the original motion.
Okay.
But as I've said, if you want to move, if it's moved with everything in, you could then move to have a specific part excluded, as long as it doesn't so change the resolution that it's entirely negative.
Or vote against.
Or you can obviously vote against it. That's entirely open to you.
So we had a pre-conversation around that. If we were going to vote on it, I'd like to do it line by line, project by project.
Well, that's one very complicated way of doing it. Or you could move the resolution excluding particular parts that you don't want included.
Okay, so shall I move to my questions other than that? Okay, so Councillor Murray brought up about the cost to maintain it. I have a few concerns about the level of service that we're currently providing with our current infrastructure, and we sweat our assets quite often. I'm not too sure when I look at facts and figures how we would maintain any new infrastructure. One of my questions I had for staff was around supporting our retailers, and that when we do these intersections, we eliminate some of our service vehicles. We have retailers already struggling. They're struggling because the economy's changed. They're struggling because we put an e-bus service through, which is now taking quite a few of our retailers across here to enhance Richmond at a cost. And now we're going to struggle to actually get goods to them because we're designing intersections whereby trucks have to pass centre lines to get there, which for me, I don't see that as being a safe option. I hear that you've done the safety audit checks, but I sit there and I've emailed you about my concerns with the intersection that we changed because we put an e-bus through. So on Vosper Street, corner Vosper and Ingalls, we had a centre island put in there to eliminate crashes because we were concerned about people's safety. And we listened to our community and we installed that. Lo and behold, best practice was we removed that when we put the e-bus run in. So instantly we have another accident. I have the police contact me, not just me, but other councillors. And I see we've come to our senses, and today we're going to sign off on putting a stop sign at that intersection. So I do sit there going, where is our risk appetite and how did that pass the safety audit? And the new proposed plans, which I oppose to, particularly on Tudor, Wilkinson, Thorpe Street, like, where is the safety aspect at that? And I do look at the revised plan, and I do look at that you're dropping the corner, so as Councillor Dowler had suggested, so that vehicles can run up and over it. But if we're still designing something that means a vehicle has to run up and over as a pedestrian, am I safe? So, yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
So again, if there are specific parts of the Motueka transport choices options that you don't want to proceed with or wish to vote against, you just need to think about how you're going to incorporate those into the resolution. Because going through each each section and each thing line by line is going to be time consuming and complex. So if there are specific things you don't want to proceed with, you can either move the resolution with those excluded, or if a resolution is moved, then you can obviously suggest an amendment to exclude the specific ones.
Thank you.
Board Member Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sitting at the table as representative of the 4 community board members of Motueka. I've been asked by one of them just to read out a comment that make it clear there's not a consensus from the community board regarding the transport choices and streets for people projects in Motueka. Some support parts, but definitely not everything proposed as per the concerns raised from the wider community. So that was regarding, I believe, 3 other board members, not me, but 3 others. It was noted when I discussed this with Councillor Māori that, in fact, the meeting on Tuesday, excuse me, no consensus was sought or requested, but that is the 3 that have said that they have concerns with this. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you through the chair. Could I just get clarification around this new approach with regards to pilot speed limits? So I know when we've talked about it before, where we had an area which was a 50k area, and we didn't agree that we could bring it down to 30k as a temporary speed limit because emergency vehicles were not going to be able to zoom past and get to the emergency. But now that we've got this new piece of legislation and we have this thing called pilot speed limits, they can go over that to get to the emergency. So I've got all that, I understand that. So I guess my question is, now that we have the mechanism of pilot speed limits, are you still satisfied that the changes and interventions we want to make are all consistent with the ability to have a 30k limit or not?
Through the Mayor, you're talking about a specific location with that question?
No, it's a general question. So we have a mechanism that we didn't have before, and we've got a program of work which looks at safety improvements and facilities for walking and cycling. So if we had had the pilot mechanism at the start of the project, would we be making any different decisions?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, no, but it definitely dovetails into sort of another process which is coming up, which is the speed management plan process. That's probably the easiest answer I can give. No, it wouldn't change anything we're proposing in this current decision report. You know, the key is we know that safety improves when you have a pedestrian crossing on a raised platform. So simply, so if you have just a normal road and you paint a zebra crossing on that, you reduce pedestrian safety by about 70%. But if you put that zebra crossing up on a raised platform that limits vehicle speed, so it's not just a sign that tells drivers how fast we think they should go, it's a physical thing that stops vehicles actually going faster than that, then that significantly improves pedestrian safety.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Mailing and then Councillor Dowler.
And we received some opposition and a survey that residents took of Hill Street from William Street to Queen Street. That's the wider part of Hill Street. The rest of Hill Street is significantly lower. And staff haven't recommended this option, but I've discussed it with 2 of my fellow Richmond Ward councillors. And we're of the opinion that option 2.2, which reduces the speed limit to 30 k's, but retains parking on that area of Hill Street, would be good for us to implement. So that's the amendment that I'd like to make, that we adopt for Hill Street the option that the staff have put in 2.2. So that's in the body of the report. There's 3 different options for that end of Hill Street.
So I guess my question is, are you willing to move the resolution with the additional item? Which
I am, but there may be some amendments from what
there may be. I'm happy to exercise further additions to the exclusion section. But if we focus, you're speaking about Richmond, and a number of other speakers have spoken about Motueka, and I've asked them to think about the exclusions they might like to propose. So
the other thing is, these are trials. None of these are permanent, as I understand it. We have to see how they work. So it means we'll have 2 different treatments on Hill Street. And Hill Street is particularly narrow from Champion Road through to about 200 metres to short of William Street. And then it widens. The most of the parking is on the Queen Street end, where the road is wider. And that's where we got significant submissions from residents in that area.
Okay, thank you. So on the basis of that, are you happy with the other suggestions for Richmond?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a good start. So
I'm happy to move it.
Okay, so we'll get the wording. We'll get the wording worked on as we speak. But what you're effectively moving is the resolution. In this case, not excluding, but I guess supporting option 2.2 in Hill Street. So we just need to get the wording correct. Give me a minute. Right, we'll come back to you. We can keep working on the wording. So I've got Councillor Dowler next.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second it so we can get the discussion going and do what we need to do. Just to make things clear from my end, is back in about 2015, I started representing Tasman's Council with Nelson City Council regarding bus routes around our district. Primary goal was to get a bus out to Motueka and out to Wakefield. It grew over the years and finally it's come to fruition. A couple of years ago, when the walking and cycling strategy was put out for public consultation, etc., and at the community board meeting, I recommended that Tudor Street would be the ideal street to have a cycle track down on the grass berm area, because at that stage, the walking and cycling strategy was indicating cycle lanes on both sides of Greenwood Street and Old Wharf Road, which was going to remove all the parking, and also down Thorpe Street. So by putting it into Tudor Street, it was added and it went out for public consultation, and eventually the cycling and walking strategy was put into place. So it was put out in the public for consideration back in the day. Now there's a lot of angst about it. It's primarily mostly off-road. The other work that's happening in Motueka, that regarding the cycleways, and I'm not a cyclist, I drive V8s and I love driving V8s, and I haven't found a bike seat that fits my backside since I left school, and I'm not looking for one. We have one that's partly formed down Queen Victoria Street, which is another off-road cycle path. That has been included to be upgraded to the requirements to meet the public's satisfaction. There's another one down past the golf club. It's primarily on golf club land, and the golf club's happy because it can get their people safe if they want to walk and down. I'll go back to the Tudor Street one. When the bus route was proposed, we weren't servicing the east side of Motueka all that well. So that was why I thought, well, if people had a bike, they could actually hop on a bike and bike down to the bus and go away for a day cruise or whatever. It's amazing that a couple of phone calls I've had just in the last couple of weeks, actually, when's the bike shelter going to be put up so I can ride my bike to the bus stop and catch the bus, so it won't get soaked when it's raining or get toasted in the sun. And we are now looking at a bike shelter in that area. So I know there's a lot of angst out there. I wasn't happy about the intersection upgrade at the Tudor Street, Thorpe Street intersection. I viewed my concerns. The staff have looked at it. I didn't like the fact that trucks had to cross the centre line when they were turning left. And that can be mitigated, as Trinity or Councillor Walker said, by a drive over section. It does create another safety concern, but that can be mitigated quite easily, hopefully. So with that modification, I'm going, that's okay. My biggest concern is the mean speed on Thorpe Street, which is damn near 70k. Now that's the average speed that vehicles are tested at. It's a 50k street. So if you wanted it 30k, when we do the speed limit reduction in a couple of months, we can make it 30k. I'd actually like it to start a little bit faster than that. And if we don't do that intersection, I'd be asking council to put a speed hump somewhere along there to slow the damn idiots down that are coming down there at that speed. And then you go around the corner onto Old Wharf Road, coming down past the rec centre. And once again, there's another raised crossing going across there, which is going to really improve the safety for kids going backwards and forwards to the skate park, etc. If that doesn't happen, I also want a speed mitigation put in there, because the speed down Old Wharf Road is also higher than 50k. People just don't seem to want to travel at the speed limit because they think it's an open space and we're off. So I'm sorry, I worked as a vehicle inspector for quite a long time, and I used to go out and do fatal motor accident reports on vehicles. And that was back in the day in Ashburton, and then I came to Motueka. And a couple of times I went out to vehicles that had cleaned kids up because they were speeding. The kid didn't judge the speed of the vehicle properly. And when we assessed it, we found out that the car was actually speeding. So there is a method in the madness here, and I will back it as my professional opinion from those days, that we need to do something. The staff are trying to kill three birds with one stone, and we've had our issues and we've had great discussions. So whether the Tudor Street, Thorpe Street intersection stays in and the one down at Wilkinson Street won't faze me at all. But there's going to be something else done to slow the vehicles down and make it safe, that's for sure. As far as Tudor Street concerned, I'll put my hand up. I'll take the blame if anybody wants to throw stones at me. I instigated that cycle lane to come down there to help the people on the east side of town. So that's all I have to say. And I look forward to any amendments if people want to put them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dowler. So just for clarity, I have a number of people on the list. Next up is Councillor Greening, then Councillor Kinnemont, Councillor Ellis, and then back to Councillor Walker. All right, Councillor Greening, you're up.
Yeah, so just two lines of query really. The first one was, it was mentioned, and maybe staff can confirm, Jamie, the degree of what was called trials and the opportunity to change. So can you just confirm if these are all trials, or what are trials and what aren't? And if they are, what is the process for feedback, and how will that be managed? And what is the timing for that feedback to come back to council to approve any subsequent changes arising from feedback? That's my first line of questioning.
Excellent question, Councillor Greening. Jamie.
Yep, through the Mayor. So any of the Streets for People projects are the ones that are being done in a trial basis. So that's trying to deliver something on the ground and use experiential consultation, so people tell us how they feel when they use it. Do they like it? Do they not like it? So that applies only to the Streets for People elements of this report. That's not the case for Transport Choices. The process for receiving feedback is the project team are using a range of methods. So online, getting into schools, door-to-door surveys. There's a lot of feedback that we're encouraging people to give us. So it's hard to answer just in one sentence, but there's a lot. We've got a whole project team dedicated to this, and we could brief you more on that if you like.
Yep. So just on the Streets for People, that then includes the whole street, is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Right. Okay. So that's all good. My other question just related to some of the cul-de-sac lines, and just want to get clarity around that. So and maybe I don't know if it's an administrative point, but I think it's Cooper Place, not Cooper Street. I think that's quite important we get the name right, otherwise we won't be able to do what we're wanting to do. Well, my question really relates to, in Cooper Place, which I think is 5.6, you're putting in cul-de-sac yellow lines. So is this consistent with Haycourt and Coleman and Todd and Stag and all those other places in that area that we're putting it in? And I assume we're putting them in because of large waste trucks can't turn, or just trying to get clarity around that?
Okay, Jamie or Mike?
Yeah, the marking the cul-de-sac with no parking lines is just in response to feedback from people that live on that street. So we're not rolling it out as a consistent program across all of our cul-de-sacs, and it's not based on feedback from the rubbish truck operators, but that might be one method we do gain feedback from time to time, but that's not the case in this.
And so is there a place, because it says no feedback, so I'm just saying this is because of feedback, or because
Correct.
of feedback, but there was no feedback?
Yeah, correct. There's no feedback after the initial request. So the initial request is feedback, as you say.
So there was some initial request, has then been proposed, and there hasn't been any feedback on the proposal.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry, just wanted to clarify that. That's all I have at this stage. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Greening. Councillor Kinmont.
Thank you. Nice to hear that we've got consistency around here for Motueka and Richmond. Now I want to talk about the poor deprived people in Māpua. First of all, their report, can I suggest maybe presented through rose-tinted glasses, and doesn't mention at all the presentation that I did here of a petition of 216 people in Māpua who opposed the Streets for People and wanted it stopped. And that's not in there. This is a lot of people in a little community saying no. And I'd like to find out what's happened to that petition. That's number one question.
Jamie, Mike.
Oh, I understand that petition was received by the council. Yep.
Just like to add the Māpua Streets People, the major decisions were made at the last traffic control devices report. So these are some minor amendments based on the road safety audit.
So yeah, so just for clarity, there are a number of decisions made previously affecting Māpua, and these ones are relatively minor alterations to that. So is the petition, or is your view that should all stop, or do you have specific concerns that you'd like to pass on to us?
Well, I haven't heard from anybody from the staff to say that we've reviewed the petition, that all the signatories are true and real people and not AI, that they do actually live in Aranui Road and do have a right to some sort of response to their petition.
Jamie?
I don't know if it's standard practice to do such an analysis. I probably can't answer that.
So when we receive a petition, the council, as you did, can decide to receive it and form a resolution to receive it, which you did, or you can choose to direct staff to take a course of action. Most petitions we receive do not outline anything that hasn't been put to council or been considered or responded to for two different forms. So there is no requirement that we respond to a petition as such, and it's actually councillors' call. Thank you.
So, and I guess, Councillor Kinmont, this is your opportunity to consider the views and put your view of those views that you've received along with your fellow ward councillors when you vote on the resolution, or make any suggestions to alter the resolution that's in front of you.
Moving on, the Finns at our first consultation weren't consulted, and after a delay of many weeks, they were consulted, and their feedback was that it was going to cause an unnecessary delay getting to emergency CPR type locations. Yet I note in your report here, clause 5.1, sorry, 5.77. Sorry, I might have the wrong one here. They still haven't been talked about on this new proposal to reduce Aranui Road to 30k an hour. I have a feeling that we're repeating the same old mistake. And I feel that it's only a phone call to say to them, what are your feelings on reducing Aranui Road to 30k?
Can I answer that? Well, Mike can jump in if he likes, but the discussions we had with FENZ was that a temporary 30k an hour speed limit was a problem for them. But if that could be done in a way that enabled them to continue to exceed the speed limit in a legal way, you know, they have certain provisions, then they would be satisfied with that. So the approach we've outlined in 5.77 is a direct result of the conversations with FENZ. But what we're signalling is that we would want to just tie that up before going ahead and implementing anything. So another, like you say, another conversation with them. Yep.
Thanks, Jamie.
One last question. Clause 5.76.1, you want to reduce the speed limit on Aranui Road from number 90 to its end at the wharf. That goes beyond the Streets for People project by about 50%. So I'd venture to suggest, and given my comments before about the petition wanting to stop the project, that this goes beyond the Streets for People project and it should be in consultation with the residents down there. So can I please ask, what would be your thoughts of taking that restriction back to the community for their feedback?
I guess when thinking of a 30k an hour speed restriction, whether pilot or not, it's not a consistent speed limit to bring it back up to 50 from the where the angle parking at the wharf is to the cul-de-sac end at the wharf. So that therefore it was just considered to take it to the end.
I'll add, I know this is where, you know, we're trying to get a range of feedback and shoehorn this into a deliverable project that kind of meets what we're hearing from the community in general, like accepting that there's some people way on one end of the spectrum, some way on the other. So speaking on behalf of the team, we did get a fair number of people when we were working through the design, people who wanted a lower speed limit, right? That was a clear kind of preference. But as we sort of talked about previously, it wasn't just as simple as putting in a temporary speed limit. We now have this pilot speed limit. And when you look at, like Mike said, the area where you might apply a pilot, you can't just start and stop it sort of haphazardly. And then the purpose of the pilot is, again, like it's the council trying something. The requirements of the legislation are that we inform the community of what we're proposing to try as a pilot. The pilot happens, and within 12 months, the council has to have received feedback and then make a decision on whether the pilot will continue or whether it should be discontinued. You know, this is really a different way of doing consultation, but I guess the reason this legislation has been set up the way it is many communities were finding it really hard to make any kind of positive change because people were so averse to change. But what in fact we've found is that a lot of people like changes after a period of adjustment. And, you know, and so getting from that point to the next point is really tough. So the legislation is designed to try and make it easier. So you can do things on a trial basis, give people a chance to provide feedback, and that is a more effective way of actually doing these types of things.
Okay, thank you. But I've just heard from the CEO that staff can decide whether or not to review that petition.
So, no, I don't. So just to be clear. So the council receives the petition. It is again up to us to ask for any action to be taken place on that. So we received it, we take account of the views, as we do with feedback we get from a whole range of other sources. Petitions don't magically have greater power than any other feedback that we receive. So we have received the petition. You now have the opportunity, as you've just outlined, to consider the feedback, raise it in this forum, see if you have support around the table for any actions that you would like taken from that petition. So I don't think it's reasonable to say that the council is determined not to accept. So we have received it, the feedback, along with all the other feedback that Jamie has just outlined on both ends, you know, supporting and not supporting. That's why we're now in this position of making decisions to implement it. I have to say, the idea of pilots and trialing things, it is kind of hard to see the downside of putting something out there when you've got different views in the community to see how it works in practice. Because what we traditionally do is it's all theoretical, it's all on paper, and we have to determine without actually being able to see it in action. And as Jamie's outlined, finally, we have both some funding and some legislation that enables us to try things, and then if they don't work, we can either remove them, change them, or alter them, which in my view is a big step forward from the way we've had to do things in the past, which is either you decide and then it's in, or you just don't do anything because you're just not quite sure how it might work out. So I think, just to be clear, the petition was received, the council has it. It's our job around the table to make things happen. As I said in the last debate, actually, we can't keep defaulting to the fact that all council staff haven't done it. That's on us. We received the petition. We are the council. We're responsible. We are responsible for the decisions that we make. Right. I've got
right reply, Mr. Mayor.
But no.
Okay.
So
I understand.
We all get to say. We don't get to.
Okay. Well then, in response to that, yes, I was out of line with that, and I do thank you for updating me on how the process works. I suppose the main issue that I've got here is going on this hikoi, if that's the right word, this journey, and bringing the residents with us. I applaud a trial, and yes, it's temporary, and let's move forward on it. Good idea. But bring people together with us. So bearing that in mind, what's the process that you've got in mind of communicating this to the ratepayers, communicating this trial to the residents so that they're aware of what's happening in their neighbourhood?
Yeah, I mean, through the mayor, there's a lot of work has gone into that. There's a comms plan, and there are dedicated comms staff who are, and you know, all of the project team, in fact, have been out to man drop-in sessions in the community. There's been a lot of letter drops. We're really trying to promote people to be aware of the best platform of receiving feedback, which is through the Stretch for People project website, and there has been a lot of feedback received. So, you know, really, I believe that the processes we've set up have been really successful at trying to get that feedback. I guess that's different from convincing everybody that it's, you know, that they should like it, because not everyone will like it. But everyone sort of has the same opportunity to provide feedback, and all of that will be received and I guess digested and fed back to the community through our engagement process.
Thanks, Jamie. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Jamie, for this report. There's a lot in it, and I think I'm going to take us right back to near the beginning. This is the problem with such a major size of a report and so much in it that it's hard to keep up with where the conversation's at. But coming back to the Berryfields solution, I'd appreciate the willingness to work with those in the community. It hasn't been mentioned earlier. It's focused mostly on car parking, but I think the solution will actually be safer, which is of the biggest concern here. So I appreciate that. And I also would like to show some support for the work in William Street. Not so much trial, but it's going to be a substantial amount of work a lot of inconvenience to those living in the street, and I appreciate them having to live with that for some time to come. But I am very pleased to see that it's happening. There are a large number of children walk through that area, bike through that area, to the schools that are concentrated in that zone. And we have to do what we can to ensure that our tamariki are being kept safe in that environment. So I would like to at least applaud that amount of work that has worked so well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ellis, Councillor Walker, and then Councillor Greening.
Thank you, through your chair. Obviously, we've had people in our community split between those who are for and those who are against. And I'm talking about transport choices in Motueka. So we don't get an option of a pilot, is that correct?
Jamie, correct. Yep.
Cool. So thank you for clarifying that. It's a bit of a shame, really. But anyway, get that. The voice from this morning was clearly send the money back, cease, or get an extension so we can come up with streets that we as a community, the big community, can agree on. And then I've got the other part of my community who says all for riding bikes, wearing my lycra, using it for leisure and to get from A to B. So again, I sit here as, quite compromised. Who do I support? Because I clearly have a divided community, as probably all of us councillors have over different topics. So my compromise is that would you please amend and remove Tudor Street, any developments on Tudor Street from this resolution. And my compromise is I'm happy for you to go ahead with Old Wharf Road because it actually links up a current cycleway to get people from one side across to the other. And one last thing is, if I may, through you, Chair, I totally acknowledge the speeds on Thorpe Street. I had a very dear member of my family live there, and I witnessed the speeds, the rat racing that happens. But you know what? I'm also mindful that the next thing that we do go and consult with our wider community is the speed limit review. So those roads will be Tudor Street, Thorpe Street. I can give you my word, those roads are going to be reduced because we don't have a choice on that. We have to reduce our speeds. So I understand where Councillor Dowler comes. However, that's my voice from my part of the
just
community.
To be clear on the last point, so you can't probably guarantee that they're going to be reduced because there is a process to go through, and like all these things, that there may be different opinions on speed limit reductions, just like there is on this particular topic. So we always be a bit careful about fully committing. You would like to move an amendment, I take it, which removes, if you just.
Tudor Street, Thorpe Street, Wilkinson Street intersections and cycleway.
You'll need a seconder for an amendment. So you need a seconder, preferably I imagine from Motueka because this is where it happens. So you may ask a question, yes.
So are you talking about just the intersection upgrades or are you talking about the cycleway as well?
I was talking about the cycleways, but I could be persuaded to keep the cycleway in, but definitely no intersections.
So you need a seconder for an amendment. So you will have to convince somebody else around the table to second it or all lapse for lack of a seconder. Councillor Murray.
So maybe if you think, Councillor Walker, I'm not going to support the removal of the Tudor Street cycleway park. But I also want to talk about, while I've got the microphone, is I don't give I don't give any weight to speed limits. So Councillor Dowler, you probably just about got me over the line in terms of the intersections. Is the speed limits mean absolutely nothing. Speed limits of Thorpe Street is currently 50k, and it's a racetrack. So I actually acknowledge the means to slow some cars down at those intersections, and that is that dilemma. And I probably came here this morning not supporting Tudor and Wilkinson Street, but at the end of the day, if some kid or child dies on those intersections because we've created cycleways and I haven't supported, I'm going to feel like crap. I can take criticism about waste of money and inappropriateness and losing some car parks. I can live with that, but I don't know if I can live with a decision that I made here if somebody does get injured at that intersection. So I certainly wouldn't support the removal of the cycleways. I could be convinced on the intersection of Councillor Walker.
Would you like me to come back to you, Councillor Walker, if you'd like to think about that briefly while I come to Councillor Greening? Councillor Greening.
Yeah. I'll let Walker have a conversation with her colleagues before I jump in, but I'm happy to support you, Councillor Walker, if you want to put this on the agenda and have a thorough debate about it. My concern is that it doesn't sound like there's a lot of community support for that in the area, and maybe it's a question of timing and a bit more consultation before we roll it out. And I think that's maybe where Councillor Walker is coming from in terms of taking her community with her. And it certainly sounds like the community's not with her on, well, not with this proposal. My question really relates to...
Sorry, Councillor Greening. So we did write to the government. So we absolutely acknowledge that the time pressure and the consultation processes have been really challenging. We wrote to the government requesting, along with Nelson City Council, because they're facing similar challenges, and requested an extension to the time frame so that we could undertake. And the answer we got was no. So if we do not do it, which is entirely within the decision making around this table, then the funding will not be available, and it would if it was, which may be very much the liking of the people sitting in this room today. But should the project come back on, or a similar project or an amended project, that would then have to be funded entirely by ratepayers at that point. So we definitely did. We definitely did ask for an extension, just for clarification. Back to you, Councillor Greening.
Yeah, so my other question, just it's more an observation really, is around these proposals that affect business interests. I'm aware that other councils who have also had great difficulty in rolling out these types of things, and I fully welcome the trial approach to this, although there is a cost incurred to council in trialling this if it suddenly has to pull it all back out again. Leaving that aside, it would be quite useful, and a trend that is appearing in other councils is around businesses, is to take into consideration the financial impact on the businesses in the trial period. So to be able to gather that financial information and see the change in business, clearly you require a business to be open to that kind of disclosure. But I think it's quite useful to see if there are financial impacts in areas that we are making changes to, because then that's a good argument to unwind them. But also it's good information for us to understand the implications of these on business areas. So I would hope that as part of the feedback and on these trials, that we will also look at the financial impact on the businesses, and we'll engage with businesses to provide, if they're open to it, that type of information.
Jamie.
We've been watching with interest how this is being managed in other areas. Wellington City Council have a program of cycleways that they're rolling out, but that's primarily is within their city area where there's a lot of retail affected. And they produce reports, and we received their most recent one last week, which has been tracking the effect, the weekly revenue of each business within those trial areas, and it's the data so far has indicated. So this data goes back to kind of 2020 up to today, and it's shown that there's been kind of negligible impact on those businesses. So that's I guess a notable result. But the majority of our projects are not really in the business area as such. So it's not happening within a town centre. So it'd be kind of hard for us to replicate that kind of data set.
Where we are making changes is what I'm really calling for. For instance, there's been feedback about changes to Salisbury Road, Queen Street, which affects an antiques business. There's been impacts on Bahara, where there's businesses operating there from our changes. To engage with those people and actually see if there are financial implications on proposed changes, if they arise. It's another tool that we should be utilising. My understanding from speaking to people in WCC and Auckland, because Auckland I think are doing it as well, is that the results have been mixed, and it depends on the type of changes that are occurring and the intensity and all the rest of it. But I think it's a useful tool that we should also be taking on board ourselves.
Yeah, so I think that can be in consideration of the feedback, particularly around the trial sites, and if our businesses are willing to share previous data, because clearly it does rise. I think you've highlighted, Councillor Granny relies on their willingness to share that pre-data for comparison, but I assume we'd be open to that conversation, Jamie.
Yep, I'll take that back to the project team and we'll work on that.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor McKenzie, and then I'll come back to Councillor Walker if she managed to find something that a seconder is willing to second. It looks as though you may have done so. So, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you through the chair.
It'd be quite nice to get to the end of this. I'm not trying to hasten you up.
Oh, okay. Look, just one of the things, I'm sure that you will do this, but I'd just like to make the point in terms of the Streets for People trials. I think it would be really good to make quite explicit the framework that you're going to use to evaluate the trial. And actually, once we've implemented the trial, put that out there in the community so that it's quite open and transparent how the trial will be evaluated.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Clearly there's no appetite from the dark side, that side of the room. And I guess I have to be compromised again with my decision, because I can get a seconder if I put a cycleway in, but not intersections. So I will back down and let you put a cycleway in, as long as you assure me those intersections will no longer be in the design or happening.
So just to be clear,
Tudor, Wilkinson, Tudor, Thorpe Streets. If you can amend the resolution.
So you'd like to move an
I
amendment.
want those excluded, those intersections.
How many of them?
Two.
Two.
Yes.
And-
Well,
and
one intersection has obviously got Taylor Street and Wilkinson and.
So just to be
Tudor
clear about the
Street.
process, so you can move it, but you actually can't prevent other councillors voting against it. So,
It's fine, they can vote against if they want.
so this is the amendment. So this is not this is not in addition to the resolution. This is an amendment. So we're not amending. So the resolution's been moved. This Councillor Walker wants to move an amendment specifically. Because generally speaking, people have generally agreed with the other suggestions for the inclusion. So this has to be taken as a separate amendment. Should it be passed, we will then amend the resolution subsequently. If it fails, obviously we revert to the resolution as currently moved. So is everyone clear what the amendment is? Well, no, the amendment is to exclude the two intersections mentioned by Councillor Walker. And that is seconded by Councillor Murray. And now that amendment is open for debate, discussion, feedback. We don't have to take any, but that is people's opportunity to speak to it. I will then put the amendment and you can vote either in favour or against. Question? Yeah, Councillor Ayling.
So this amendment would remove the speed mitigation in the treatments on Thorpe Street.
Through the Mayor, yeah. The designs for those intersections at the moment include speed mitigation measures, and they also provide a logical endpoint and continuation of the cycle lane into the surrounding network. So that's some common feedback we get from our cycleway users, is they don't like the way the cycleway just ends. Where do I go now? Yeah, what am I supposed to do? And so part of the way we've been designing the whole package is to try and get as many continuous linked up pieces of infrastructure as we can, because that's what the users tell us they want. And to answer your question directly, yeah, some key parts of each of those intersections are speed control measures to make it safe for people to cross there. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Are there any further questions? So just on the amendment for the purposes of this conversation? If not, Councillor Walker, do you wish to have a right of reply?
Yep.
So is everyone clear what the amendment entails? I'll put So moved, Councillor Walker, seconded Councillor Murray. All right, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against? I'll do a show of hands. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. 6. All those against? 6, 7, is that right? 6, 7. Councillor Greening, which way? I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Desires of being in the, I'm trying to find the picture of the intersection, to be perfectly frank. I can't see it anywhere.
Okay, it was slightly late to start scrabbling for that, but did you vote?
No, I'm trying to find the intersection before I can vote.
So you didn't vote?
No,
Would you
I
like to
haven't voted
vote
at all.
on the amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to see the intersection first, though. What page is it on?
89, if it's helpful.
What page was that?
Page 89 is the one of them.
Page 89. '89. No, go on. This is of the agenda or of the report?
Well, it's the same thing.
Okay, I was buried in the attachments trying to find a picture.
It is likely that in any event, which either is going to be even, which no casting vote, so status quo, i.e. the resolution stands as it is, or it's going to be lost because it's 7-6. But I'll still give you the opportunity to vote should you wish to, Councillor Greening.
Yeah, so this is the intersection on Thorpe and Shooter with the cycleway. So you're proposing that there's no cycle crossing there. Is that what you're proposing, Councillor Walker?
At the intersection.
No raised crossing.
Yeah,
No,
so effectively there will be no treatments on the intersection. That is effectively what Councillor Walker is moving, Councillor Greening correct. No movements, no crossing, no raised crossing, just no treatment.
And the reason for not having a crossing, I would have thought is there's a safety issue there.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Walker has been very clear what her reason is in the course of the debate. And we're now at the point of we've put the resolution on, just waiting for you to confirm which way you're voting on it.
I would probably support the changes in the intersection.
Okay, so you're voting against the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That makes it clear. So the amendment is lost, 8-6, which we revert to the substantive resolution, which has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Does the mover wish to have a right of reply? I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Yes. And would you like your vote recorded? Okay, thank you. So that draws us to the conclusion of that item. That also draws us to the conclusion of this part of the meeting. We'll break for lunch and we'll be back at 1 o'clock.
On the table. This is a yearly report that we produce at about this time of the year. It's generally September by the time we actually land the plane for the previous financial year. It essentially looks at all the activity balances across the organisation and makes some brief comments to give you an idea of where they've ended up. And I have a cast of people around me that will help out with any queries that you might have with any particular areas. Just to give it a little bit more context as well, we obviously do an annual report that we get an audit opinion on. That's coming to the Audit and Risk Committee next week, and it's a slightly different take, or quite a bit different take of the same information, if you like. So yeah, happy to open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Matt. It's open for questions. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. I think I answered my own question. That was that there'll be another paper in terms of balancing the deficits and balances that you've got in that carryover. So somewhere in deficit. So there's another report coming for that, I think I read. But the statement around the Motueka Harbour and Coastal Works Fund, I couldn't understand why that was an increase in surplus that was unknown when it was just repayment of interest and principal. Wouldn't that have been budgeted and expected?
Through Mr. Mayor, I think we didn't actually realise that was a decision that was made subsequent to us doing the annual plan. Bearing in mind the annual plan does happen quite a lot before the 1st of July each year, so there are some changes. So that would explain that. And actually, just to clarify, that this is the report about the surpluses and deficits. Essentially, though, what staff need to turn our mind to is those deficits and those surpluses in terms of how they impact the long-term plan.
Okay, thank you. I got Deputy Mayor Bryant and then Councillor Kinnemont.
Thank you. Just a question, Matt, in relation to resolution 3, just the transfer of 1.88 million to the subsidising roading activity. I'm assuming that's not going to leave us very much in the general disaster fund. What's the proposal to for the want of a better word, refill that or replace that money?
Right, through you, Mr. Mayor. That's part of your LTP considerations. Indeed, that was part of your prioritisations that you set. One of the items was the emergency fund. Essentially, there's a couple $100,000 in parks and reserves. The Three Waters emergency funds have a little bit more in them, but could be part of that transfer. As it stands, the prioritisation exercise made those not a priority. So that's something that, again, ELT or staff need to consider in terms of coming back to you with an LTP proposal of the musts plus the options, and from that you'll see where that lies and make comment on it then.
Okay, and any indication when that might be? Workshops.
That particular workshop will be 17 October when you start to get a flavour for that. Then there's a succession of meetings after that about the particular asset management plans and what the must, goods and shoulds look like.
And just to follow up, so do we have any sort of criteria or established that we have a base fund there, or is that those days gone? Like I think we were aiming for somewhere between 2 and 5 million initially.
Yes, so you adopted a policy recently that talked about having $16 million across those accounts. So essentially, we've got under $1 million in a couple of them. So we're a long way. We're a long way from there, and we're a long way off that. So
yeah, that's going to make the LTP tougher, isn't it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much through the chair. I can't help but start with the exception of having a real problem with names today. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It looks like you're having a beard growing competition.
Oh, Leone.
Leone. With the exception of Leone, it looks like you're having a beard growing competition. Anyway, moving on.
The important thing is which one's best.
Okay, so look, I have got a couple of 2 or 3 questions. I mean, there's, this is actually quite an important report, and there's a lot actually in here when you actually think about producing a surplus, and we've talked about this before. How do you actually explain that to anybody other than the accountants so that they actually understand it? So that's a job that you've got in front of you, but it's actually a really important one. There's the whole thing around trading off activity balances and how that impacts on the net debt and all the rest of it. So you've got all that complication wound into here as well. I guess one of the big things for me in here is actually where we have activities that are basically fully cost covered activities, for example, dog control. And then we report that dog control has run at a deficit, and we're going to offset that against something else. In my mind, I'm going, well, how is that then a fully cost recoverable activity? And I mean, in the building assurance area and some of the water area and in dog control, you know, I feel as though in doing that, it goes against our kind of stated arrangements around cost recoverable activities. So be interested in a comment on that. I would also like to know which school pools did not receive their subsidy. So if we've got a surplus because we didn't have pools claiming the subsidy, I'm sure that there isn't a pool out there that's got flush with money, and how did we encourage them to apply? So I'd like to get that piece of information. And the other one I was sort of interested in was the, I might have missed something here, the one-off payment of $125,000 to the Nelson Provincial Museum. Was that something we had approved earlier, or how? So anyway.
Can I answer the last one? Yeah, there was a resolution that came through.
Thought I might have missed that one. So, yeah, particularly the pools, you can come back to me later on that. But yeah, that view around cost recoverable activities.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a challenge for us on occasions. So when we set the budgets, we set them in anticipation of the corresponding fees and charges providing the appropriate revenue stream. So, you know, as you say, dog control is a really good one, so that covers its cost. On occasions, we don't get it right. And on occasions, there are additional costs come in that we hadn't anticipated. One of the challenges we have is that feedback loop and the need to increase, for example, fees and charges in the following year. So we were able to transfer surpluses from one activity to a deficit in another. We try to do that so we start with, shall we say, a cleaner sheet for the following year. Otherwise, you're doing things like increasing your fees and charges to catch up on what you didn't collect in the prior years. So we acknowledge that we don't get it right always. We acknowledge that we have to improve the feedback loop that allows us to set fees and charges in some cases in a better way. And we have been doing some additional work in that space. So in Kim Drummond's resource consenting area, we've had a solid look. We've actually brought some additional resources in to look at the drivers and why there are gaps in some of the fees and charges, and are we meeting those revenue and finance policy targets?
If I may, so I mean, I maybe could understand that, you know, the dog control one was, you know, 26,000 or something. But for example, in the building assurance category, the deficit was 947,000. So is the building assurance activity supposed to be a fully cost recoverable one?
Yes, it is.
Sorry. No, sorry, I'll keep looking at mine. Yeah, it's 90% through fees and charges and 10% of rates.
So I mean that's $1 million that we're actually saying that we're subsidising the general ratepayer, who potentially gets no benefit from that, is actually subsidising those who needed those services. And I mean, that's quite significant to me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you'll note that there's no resolutions about those transfers in terms of what you're seeing there. The reason for that is our delegation policy allows us to look at balances and live within that in the operating budget as a council. However, there is nothing to stop us considering those concerns in the upcoming LTP, essentially.
And I think this has already been raised by John as part of some of our initial workshops. So we need to reconsider the recovery policy that we have, because we actually have quite a lot of 90-10s and 80-20s and things where there has always been a degree to which the councils believe that there is a public good in having good building assurance and other activities, consenting, etc. So it's never been 100% user pays. Now, clearly we can move to 100% user pays. That still doesn't get past the fact that in some years, if you get the budget out by $1 million, you're still going to have a deficit in that account that you're then going to have to recover through a change to the fee. As Mike pointed out, the next year you're going to have to catch up. So you're going to have to budget for what you believe the next year is and catch $1 million up again. So whichever way you do it, it's challenging. But that is absolutely a debate for the LTP over whether the 90-10, 80-20 kind of splits that we have across a number of these activities is still appropriate. The other thing is making sure our budgets are as accurate as we can possibly get them, subject to all the issues that we can't foresee, and notably this one, the use of consultants, which will have a significant impact because we don't have in-house resources. So, yeah, trade-offs all over. But I think the point is absolutely the right one, that these sort of activities, we need to very clearly understand, are we expecting it to be 100% cost recovered? What are the consequences of 100% cost recovery, both in terms of budgeting, but also how would that then affect deficits like this that happen from time to time? And if the result of that is suddenly a big increase in building consent fees next year to catch up, do you know what I mean? That's also not necessarily a good outcome. So, conversation, but point well made.
Okay, because in actual fact, maybe when we have that LTP conversation, I guess I would be wanting to understand, so what has been the situation, say, for the last 3 years? Because I haven't gone back to last year's report or the years before report, but hypothetically, if I had and I'd found that it was $1 million each year, then I'd be not very happy about that.
Well, I suspect the fact we had a surplus at the start of this year means we didn't have a deficit at the end of last one. Yeah. Janine.
I also just want to add that in the past, what we've had is we've had building consenting and resource consenting and regulatory and environmental functions all together, and there is a bit of a pattern of swings and roundabouts across those, evening out at the end of the day. Now our structure change, which has separated out those things, has meant that this is now much more apparent. Quite simply, your point is absolutely correct. We've got to get to the bottom of it. We've got to keep digging to understand it, and we've got to make sure our cost recovery model is right. So all of those discussions are going on. That one probably, it's fair to say, our most alarming.
Thank you, Councillor Kinnemont, and then Councillor Walker.
Thank you. I was just scrolling and listening to you, and I now missed the page 11, 4.51. Yeah. Thank you. The leading sentence there is once the rehabilitated land is sold, is that putting words in our mouths, or is that like fait accompli? Is it going to be sold?
Mike. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Those councillors who've been around the table for a number of years will remember the early days of the rehabilitation work. So essentially it was partly funded by central government and partly funded by council. The undertaking council gave to the community at that time was that once remediated, the non-waterfront parkland would be sold and those proceeds would be used to pay the remediation cost. That undertaking is still on council's books, and council resolved, I'd need to check the year, some years ago to put the sale on hold while it worked on the waterfront plan for Māpua. So they resolved to do that. It's probably 4 to 5 years ago now. Longer than that. It was, yeah. That's certainly within my time at council, that decision was made. So currently the Decision to sell stands as a council resolution, but it's on hold while the decisions on the wider developments of Māpua occur. Hence the comment in the officer's report.
Thank you.
Too much going on my mail. 4.76 Māpua Stopbank. There being no activity carried on there because no work was undertaken on seawall maintenance. So this work that we're talking about here will also include maintenance on all our assets. Have I missed something here?
Possibly. In the case of the Māpua Stopbank, because it's a closed account, presumably, or a targeted rate, and the maintenance of that wall alongside its original construction is what forms part of the rate. So in that particular instance, yes, it does include the maintenance, but only in relation to that particular activity.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
John?
I can answer the poll question. Yep. So just for context, we pay out $1,000 a year. That's the budget for primary schools and $2,500 for high schools. We've paid out, we email and make contact with each of the schools every year. We paid out to 16 schools that subsidy, plus we paid $20,000 to keep the Motueka pool open, if that means anything to anyone, during the summer as well. I don't know if that means anything to you. Okay. Is that okay? Mouth wide open. I'll shut mine off.
Well, it tells me what you did, but the paper says that less was paid, so I'm more interested in who didn't get their money.
Yeah.
There's your answer. Do you want to say?
So I don't believe the Motueka pool opened last summer, so there would have been that saving.
So, excellent. Right. Anything further, Councillor Kinnaman? Councillor Walker?
Yeah, thank you, through Chair. I guess for me, I sit here looking at this report, which is able to be read by anyone in our community, and I do just want to know what reputational risk do we have with where all this sits. And I hear where Councillor Mackenzie comes from, and the pools is but just one example. So do we feel comfortable with where we've landed is my first question. And then my second one is, how does this information filter into the long-term plan? So how do we leverage off this to make sure in the long-term plan these figures are acknowledged?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The staff are not comfortable with some of these numbers, as you would expect, where we've got activities that are running large deficits that were unexpected or unplanned. It's a matter we need to turn our mind to in terms of what the drivers were and how we might address that moving forward. All of the information in this report supports the decisions you'll be asked to make in formulating the financial envelope and the likes for the long-term plan. So if, for example, we are making significant deficits in a particular activity, a conversation for the long-term plan might be, what do the fees and charges setting for that activity need to be, which will then lead you to a conversation about what is affordable within your community. And so you'll get the chance to, in my words, pull the levers about what you do, where you focus and how we address issues. Where a deficit, for example, is as a result of a one-off, then that leads you to a conversation about things like your emergency funds. How much do we hold back? In the last long-term plan, as part of your financial strategy, you noted those activities that had significant surpluses, and you resolved to feed those surpluses back over time, about 5 years, if I recall correctly, in order to hold the rates down over time. And so they are some of the decisions you will make as part of your long-term plan considerations.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, is that anything further? Deputy Mayor Bryan and then Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in relation to resolution 2 and looking at attachment 2, just have a question in relation to the water metering there, 100,000. And wonder if Kim might be able to, I'm assuming, explain that further, what that's required for. It says funds needed to develop the WCM water metering component to address the Waimea Dam management. It's 100K.
Through the chair, what paragraph did that one come
It's
in?
in the chart, about 5 down from the top.
What I am aware on the water metering front is that with the non-affiliated permits not being required to be telemetry, it's one heck of a work program to try and manage in real time, because as soon as the dam becomes operational, we've got a real-time monitoring obligation. And so moving to a telemetry system is where we need to head, and whether that is signalling the sort of investment that we would need to take us in that direction. But even in going that direction, there's several choices as to whether we do that internally or whether we actually do that through a third-party provider. So I'm only guessing whether that might be what
I'm trying to establish what the money's for, because I thought the consent holders had to provide that.
Yes, they do, but they do that through a very, I mean, the system to collect that information needs to be built so it can come in. At the moment.
It's on our end, right?
Yeah, so at the moment it's yes, it's real time, but it's a combination of photos taken of meters, so the meters are not used, and it's very quite draining on staff. So that system needs to be modernised, whether that's the sort of back office investment that we need.
And just to clarify, so because like you, my understanding is that consent holders, non-affiliated consent holders, have to provide telemetering from their
other consent holders. Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have to provide the telemeter data to us. Yes. What we have to provide is a system that can receive that in real time from. So we need to make an investment to ensure that their investment is
able to be used.
Able to be used, correct.
Were you just about to clarify that with us? Because I'm wondering how they're all going to get online so quickly. I guess they've known for a number of years this is coming. Yeah. But yeah, can you just provide us with some further information, or particularly self in the near anyway? Circulate it. Yeah, circulate it or.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just if I may, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll catch up with both of you afterwards, because I was just concentrating on another thing that was going down, so I missed the initial question. So rather than hold up the meeting, I'll talk to you afterwards. I could have some information that might bring some clarity that, if I am correct, we can share with councillors. If I haven't, I'll go away and find out. I was just trying to struggle for the conversation.
All right, thank you.
That's the trouble. You're trying to do two things at once, isn't it, Steve? I know that feeling.
Right, further comments on this report? Sorry, Councillor Butler, but your question has re-emerged.
The question has re-emerged or another one. Yeah, I just about the topic of resource information. What does that encompass? Is that all the environmental monitoring information? I have looked at attachment number 2, and it's got some things in there, but my question is that that not completing all the budgeted work streams for a start, and then moving some to other budgets, moving out to other budgets where not all work has been completed, and then leaving 800,000 in there, but that actually could come out because to offset rates. And I'm just wondering whether or not we're just selling that area short if we're not actually getting the work done. And is it because we can't get the staff to do the work, or because I know we've got a lot of monitoring requirements now that we didn't have before.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So it's a combination of all of those sorts of factors. Difficulty in getting staff in some areas, which is why you'll see that we might complete some of our monitoring requirements and not others because we've been unable to get staff in a particular area, for example. So there's a lot of movement within the various monitoring activities that we've got that ultimately has resulted in that underspend. It's not that we have taken a specific decision to discontinue or to do less in a particular area. It's that the course of events has resulted in that outcome. So we're not choosing to do less in some areas and then carry it over into future areas at all.
It's right to be confident that we're not going to shortchange that area of work.
No, we're not. Hence the carryover.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Butler, Councillor Kinnemont, and then Councillor Hill.
I'll be short. I can't understand some of these spreadsheets. Page 43, and I'm only just on this because at the top it's got actual expenditure for total water supply over 20 million. Approved budget was 11.9 million.
So is this in?
This is in the next report, is it?
Tables at the bottom of this one.
Page 43.
Yeah. Next report. Next report. So that's on that. Yeah,
I will withdraw that question.
That's all good. Save the question for the next report.
Yes.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you. Just wanting to understand the Cobb Valley subsidy / non-subsidy, how that works.
I would need to pass to my colleague, Mr. Kirby, or he in turn may need to talk to his transportation manager. Sorry, Richard, do you know much about the Cobb Valley one? Certainly, I know historically it's been a
I don't know the details, but I know there is an agreement with the power company on maintaining their road. We do it and they pay us for it. Yeah. And I think they actually pay 100%.
Right.
For a section of it.
Thank you. It's just trying to understand the subsidy / non-subsidy. Like I can't quite get my head around that. So is it relate to part of the road or I don't know?
It has to do with the subsidy from Wakakatahi. So in effect, I think the power company actually pays what we call the local share of 100%, and then we get the subsidy from Wakakatahi because it is a public road going up there, and they fund that part of it. Yeah.
It is our road.
So just in case, unless if you're 100% sure of the answer and all the details, then by all means carry on. If you would like to come back to us with some further detail about the Cobb
Jamie to come back to you on it, but
probably a good idea.
Okay.
so that whatever it is that we're all clear is actually the situation. Right. So there's a couple of things for people to come back on in due course. Right. Anything further before we move? Okay. So move, Councillor McKenzie. So in terms of the resolution, is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. That brings us on to the next report, which has already been subject to a question before we've even started. Same name.
Yes,
Matt,
through you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, carryover report again, very standard. We do it once a year. So this is the projects. The attachment lists out some projects that were either partway through or not started. Provides a reason. We talk about carrying those over into 2023-24, but equally there's another conversation is had at the same time where some of those actually get moved out of some other projects get moved out of 2023-24 annual plan into the following year. It's fair to say again, as part of our long-term plan considerations, we're having a look at what the reality of the amount that we're supposed to be spending in this year's 2023-24 capital program looks like. I think it's about 93 million. So that will be part of the considerations as we develop the next 10 years long-term plan, if you like, as to where some of that 93 million moves out to. Happy to open for.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mayling.
Right. Well, this report gives me some concern, particularly, and Richard, you might like to come to the table because you'll probably get some of these. One is it's a bigger amount that we're carrying over, I think, than from the past. And I understand the staff have been, some of our project officers have been particularly busy with some other projects that we got some money for from someone else. But the other thing is when you have a capital program going forward of 93 million, we have never delivered anywhere near that in the past. And my concern is that we have rated for this borrowing, not for all of it as I understand it, because I got told it was 2/12, but it still means that we've increased our rates by a certain amount. So our ratepayers are paying for something that we're not getting. They're not getting because it hasn't been delivered in the year. So at 5% is what I started at. And if you were 30 million short, that's 1.5 million. That's 1.5% on the rates. Now, I understand it's probably lower than that, but it's a concern. So I would want to see at least 30 million come out of this capital project in the coming year, because I don't think we'll get anywhere near the 90 when you look at the history. And it's been one of the things that I've probably hammered over the years, that if we're not close enough, don't put it in. If you can't deliver it, don't put it in, because we get it in the net to say, well, you rated us for something you haven't delivered. So we can have all the excuses we like under the sun, but that's consistently, we're getting in this pickle every year. And we need to get closer. And I think we did previously, the previous year, but this year we've gone backwards. So a rant from me, but I think it puts us in a poor light, where we've collected money and we haven't done it. And I know Matt said to me, it's you don't rate for all of it, but we still rate for it.
Any feedback? I guess this is an historical conversation. You have to look at the table under 2.3. So the average, 5-year average for capital spent is 46.8. So, and 60 is the best we've ever done. And the delivery mechanism for this hasn't actually changed that dramatically in terms of contractor capacity, availability, all of those other things. So I think Councillor Mayling's question is entirely appropriate, and clearly part of it is a conversation for the LTP. But if I recollect correctly, some of the initial works, it does show some rather large capital budgets going forward. And I think it's a legitimate question from council as to if they are not genuinely achievable, bearing in mind there's always little bits and pieces. You're never going to get 100%. I'd accept that. But then, and as Councillor Mayling's also pointed out, this is kind of a perennial conversation that we don't appear to have got significantly better at resolving. So, yeah, I don't know if it needs a response, but I guess it is being asked as a question.
Yeah, I'll comment on it. This year's, we were heading for a record this year, back in January, but then the Streets for People came along and basically hijacked 2 or 3 of the project managers, and they had to delay work that they were working on. So that's created a bit of a problem for us. We've also diverted staff. One of our staff is almost full-time on the LTP from the project management team. So the only way we can deliver these is putting resources into the project delivery team if council wanted to do that. I mean, they can cut it back, or you can cut it back if you want to. But if you want to deliver it, we're going to have to bring more project manager resources into the team to actually deliver it. Also, we're in a more complex environment now. You've heard this morning about the consultation that's required, and Streets for People has been a classic example of it. There's a lot more time being spent in consultation than what we did previously. There's a lot more landowner issues and land issues that we're having to work through, and purchasing land and those sort of things, and that's creating a problem too. So I know the team's looking out 2 to 3 years to see how we can plan that, but there is a major hump to get over some of the projects we've got in place now. So my answer to you is that if you do want to deliver more, we're going to have to beef up the resources within the project delivery team, or hire in resources to get these projects done.
So I mean, that is obviously going to be a conversation for the LTP, and that'll be reflected in the budgets, because bringing in resources sounds like a great idea, but it doesn't come free. So it is going to add a cost to what we're already predicting. And we've already significantly increased the project management team over the last 3 to 5 years. So that alone has not been sufficient to get us to the point. So at some point, again, we just have to have this conversation about throwing more resources at something, of which a number of the other things you mentioned, land availability, consultation, are not resolved simply by throwing resources at them. The question remains about the actual practicality or deliverability of a capital program. So I don't want to go into it in a great more detail. The question has been asked. I think generally councillors will share the concern, and it will form a pretty crucial part of the discussions around the finances for the LTP.
Can I just add, Mr. Chair, as well, is that all the project managers are funded against these projects, so it's not an FTEs added to the overheads, as it were, for council. The projects actually fund the project managers.
Yeah, but it will, and if you need more resources, it has to be funded, whether it's in the project or in the. So as long as we're all clear, there's no free resources coming. Okay, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you. I just want to explore it a little bit more. I mean, in paragraph 2.5, we say staff acknowledge that delivering a program of 92.2 million of capital work is not achievable. And then further on in the report, under 4.11, we say staff are confident that the 23-24 budget is deliverable. So I'm asking in my mind whether those two statements are in direct conflict with each other or whether I'm comparing apples with bananas. But Mr. Mayor, you're talking about it being an LTP discussion. At this point, I'm focusing on the budget for 23-24 capital program. And I'm wondering whether there needs to be an assessment done of likelihood of deliverable, high, medium or low. I'm not sure that I want to push it out for the LTP discussion.
Entirely fair question. Janine.
Yes, there is already a discussion underway. We've been having that very discussion. This is a little bit like Groundhog Day. We keep seeing this over-prediction of capital spending and then we don't meet it. And so we've been having the very same discussions. It is pointless doing the same things and expecting something different. And that's really hard because I'm probably going to explain this more crudely than the staff involved would, but these projects just bank up. They don't sort of go away or just sort of, we can just sort of push them away. So we do get that bit of a bow wave and we always get, I think, a little bit over optimistic about what we can deliver. We've been having the very conversation you just talked about. What are the projects? We allow, I'll call it a portion of the capital program to say this is I think it's Mike 10 or 15%, where we say we need to allow that to say just cut it off because we're not going to deliver to that level. 10 or 15%.
Through Mr. Mayor. Yes, in that order. So what I would call it, I'd say we take a haircut so we don't rate for every project that's in the capital works project. We do it at a fairly high level. Take that off because we know that typically for one reason or another, not the whole capital works program will be delivered.
So through the chair, the conversation we've been having about that was something we've been doing for the last couple of years. Doesn't do it. And yes, you could say, do you make it a greater percentage? What we're proposing to do is something a little bit more measured and look at the nature of the project. What's the likelihood that there'll be difficulties attached to delivering it, like land purchase or something like that? And you might allow a bigger portion for those ones. And then the ones that are more straightforward, you might allow a smaller portion. So we're proposing to make that more nuanced. But I think, I'm just going to wear this one and say, not surprisingly, you're challenging us around this. It isn't a surprise to us because we keep this pattern going and we have to resolve it.
If I may.
Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, if I may. So how will the loop be closed with us on where you get to with that? And I've still got this kind of memory in my memory bank about what happened in Dock when we had a big build-up of underspent capital and someone called the Treasury came in and took the money away. So, but yeah, so how will that loop be closed?
So it's probably a question better directed at my colleague Richard Kirby, but I anticipate we would be coming back to council with a program of work that is deliverable in the 23-24 year. That's a foundation piece for the decisions you need to make on what's deliverable during the LTP. So you need to remember that we don't do the LTP in isolation. We're actually looking at the current year and saying, where's the plane going to land at the end of 23-24? Because that's where we start our LTP. Certainly there's a significant conversation going on about how we manage the program of work. So it is a deliverable program of work. And as councillors have pointed out, we don't overpromise and underdeliver to our communities.
Right, so I'll take any other questions or speakers before we come back to the resolution. I mean, ultimately what we have to ask ourselves, or are we comfortable with what's being recommended in terms of the carryovers, which totaled $27.4 million? And how does that fit with the conversation that we've just had? Others, is there anyone else? I'm happy to go back to Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Mailing, but Councillor Mailing and Councillor McKenzie.
Well, I think it's a good conversation to have. So the staff have got a clear message, I think, at least from me and from others, that we're particularly unhappy. And it's probably a bit embarrassing for the staff in some ways. But so to me, I'm prepared to move this, but I want to see something before the end of this year, earlier rather than later, about what we're going to deliver and what's going to be pushed out, because I don't want it to impact on our ratepayers, going forward, because that's what this has done. Simple as that. We've rated for something we haven't delivered. So I'll move the resolution to carry over, because some of these projects will have been started and not finished. So we have to do that. But it needs to be fixed so that we don't get like this again, or not to this extent, because this is nearly 50%. So it's not good.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mailing. Oh, Councillor Dowler. Okay, seconded Councillor Dowler, so it's been moved and seconded. Councillor McKenzie.
Well, I'm happy to support the resolution, but actually I'd just be looking to Councillor Mailing. I just wonder whether we couldn't include a note that actually, noting that, we have requested a consideration of the 23-24 program of work with a report back or something along those lines.
Yep, I'm happy if the mover's happy and the seconder. Right, any further comments or feedback? Oh, resolution disappeared. No, you're right. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to make sure I've got the resolution, the right note. You're right. You're right. Oh, it's up there now. Okay, all good. So with the addition of that note, I will put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Mike, while you're in the hot seat, local government funding agency report. Mike, over to you.
Through Mr. Mayor, councillors, this is a routine report. Each year at this time, you'll see the annual reports coming through from all of our CCOs. This is the local government funding agency CCO. Council was one of the founding members of the LGFA, and as what's called a nominating council, we have a seat on the LGFA Shareholders Council. So you have quite an ability to influence the feedback that goes through to the LGFA board. This has been a good year for the LGFA, as you've noted within the report. Their borrowing levels, or at least their lending to councils, is up. That reflects the sector as a whole. So moving forward, we're likely to see further increases in lending to the sector. The LGFA remains the lender of choice for most councils. And the council, we hold shares, more shares than what typically a council our size would have. The dividend was 6.85 cents a share. So those holding those shares has allowed us to offset some of our borrowing costs to the tune of $128,000. There's no debt outstanding on those shares. The debt on the shares was paid back some years ago. So by and large, it's been a good year for the LGFA. I'm quite happy to take questions on the report, but I'll take the report as read.
Thank you, Mike. Deputy Mayor Bryant, then Councillor Hill.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions, Mike. I'm at 4.2.3. Just in relation to the outstanding loans of 16.31. And that's a huge amount of money that would have once been borrowed from the bank. So there must be a huge saving and interest cost to councils. So that's the first question.
Yes, the borrowing costs that all councils who use the LGFA get significantly below the commercial rates we would have got from the banks. Certainly this council, amongst others, has benefited from that. It's worth remembering that some of the larger councils like Auckland and I think Dunedin City actually borrow in the market in their own name, simply because the LGFA has a limit to how much money it can lend to Auckland City, so it doesn't dominate its portfolio.
Right, and then my second question relates to the total members is lifted to 77 councils. Just in line with what you've just said, that must just about be every council in New Zealand now.
It is virtually every council in New Zealand. There's one or two, I think, that don't have any significant borrowing. They tend to be the regionals, but virtually every council has come into the fold in terms of the LGFA over a period of time.
So no, it really has been a good news story. I remember when it was first at the time in discussion, it turned out to be a good thing. And I'm happy to move the resolution.
Okay, thank you. So it's been moved. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I just think so. Auckland no longer a member of Local Government New Zealand. Do they still get access to this? If so, they don't because was that decision made at LGFA that they would be too big and would affect the portfolio?
So, and you don't have to be a member of LGNZ to be a member of the LGFA. It's quite separate. It's like sort of joining the building society, if you like. You get to choose to join. If you join, you take on board the rules and the security and the obligations that a member of the LGFA has. And so that is there. In the LGFA founding documents, the rules that were set in those was that Auckland City wouldn't make up more than 35% of the lending that the LGFA does. That's simply so it doesn't have a large concentration of risk. The LGFA is part of the lending portfolio that Auckland City has. With its billions of dollars worth of lending, it's also quite active out in the market and it is of a size that it can play in the market simply because it has lending, and that lends itself to the approach they take.
Thank you.
Councillor Claremont and then Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, to get a Standards and Poor's rating of AAA is absolutely stunning. Very good stewardship of the organisation. My question is that 80% of it is from the councils and 20% is government. That 80-20, is that a fixed rule within them, or?
That was the original issue of shares in the LGFA. So there have been no new shareholders admitted to the LGFA in recent years. You don't have to be a shareholder of the LGFA to borrow from it. Our council is a shareholder. The split of the shares goes back to the original contributions that the Crown made to help set up the LGFA and what's referred to as the Type 9, which was the 9 original shareholding councils put into the LGFA.
Yeah. Yes, so Stuart just said it seems a long time ago and a relatively small amount of money for somebody that now lends $18 billion, is it? Given our contribution at the time, which was the subject of a very significant conversation as to whether we should contribute and become a shareholder and help kick the whole thing off. So yeah, it has been interesting to see its growth over that period of time. Councillor Butler.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's a couple of things in the annual report that are interesting, and one of them is an initiative in developing a ratepayer financing scheme, which has been developed with the objective of providing some financial relief options to ratepayers. That's just in the message from the chair, and I'm just wondering if you know anything about that. And then the other thing was that I see that a swimming pool's been funded through one of their special funds in Nainai, I think. And so would that be, if we get that far with the Motueka pool, an option for us out of that particular fund in the LGFA?
So the comment referring to ratepayer funding is actually a scheme that's been developed by a number of the councils, and LGFA will back that scheme and they'll borrow through the LGFA. The other loans that are going through that are becoming quite notable, really the green and sustainable loans. So that's a new product for the LGFA. You need to ensure that your project aligns with the requirements for that, and it brings quite a bit of reporting requirement in there. So we're looking at that. So in some cases, larger councils have picked an entire project and it's a green project, whether it's a new convention centre for Wellington or, as you've noted, the Nainai pool. So they wrap a whole project up in that. Other councils are putting a portfolio together and saying we've got a portfolio of capital works programs that we're borrowing for, and the portfolio, shall we say, is green. This council is looking at how we do our borrowing through the LGFA. Those of you who remember 2012 or 2013 and were around the table, we changed our borrowing practices then. And so we fund our balance sheet as a whole. So we don't sit on $50 million worth of cash while borrowing $50 million from the bank. We arbitrage our own balance sheet. We borrow what we need. And when we did that, we lost the link between a particular loan and a particular project. So we're looking at how we might put that back so we can take advantage of some of these new borrowing products. Typically, they have a very small reduction in the borrowing cost, probably mostly offset by additional reporting costs. But it is important for us moving forward. And it's important for the LGFA. As the people who buy LGFA bonds, principally institutional investments, they are looking for green bonds. They're looking for sustainable products. And the local government sector is well positioned to tick the boxes on those types of borrowing and those types of bonds. So long story short, new products coming into place. We're looking at how we can best utilise those in our borrowing. And it's a very good news story for the LGFA in terms of what it's doing. But also, I think for us as shareholders, I think it's really good that we have an organisation that is keen to address those market concerns and is acting in a very positive way.
Okay, thank you. I did note that in order to access that, that's because it's the New Zealand's first 5 Green Star pool. So I suspect there's probably some cost associated with meeting that test as well. Yep. All right, thank you. Is there anything further? It's been moved. Has it been seconded? Someone happy to second? Councillor Butler. Happy to. It was moved, Deputy Mayor Bryant. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Next item is the River Stopbank Recompense Policy.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Kirby.
Jamie's here to answer the question about the Cobb Road.
Jamie. Grab a microphone.
Yeah, Chair. So the question was around the
subsidy, non-subsidy.
Okay.
So the line is subsidy, non-subsidy, and it was clarification around the ownership of the road and how the subsidy, non-subsidy works.
Okay, so the council have an agreement with Trustpower and DOC that those organisations will fund the maintenance of that road. So in theory, it's maintained at zero cost or no net cost to the council. But because the council acts as kind of banker, because we are responsible for making sure the work happens and then subsequently recovering the costs, we're at a place where we haven't yet recovered some of the costs, but our finance team are working with Trustpower and DOC around that. So I hope that clarifies.
Okay, and the status of the road itself, so the legal status of the actual road?
Yep. So it is still a local road. So it's within the council's purview. But that's a live conversation we're actually having with DOC, because now that DOC are a road controlling authority in their own right, we're just working through some issues with that. But we expect it still to remain a cost neutral thing for council, but just legally whether we're responsible or DOC are responsible. At the moment, we're managing it on the basis that we are still responsible until we get legal confirmation otherwise.
So when did DOC become a right? I don't want to drag this out, but
in the 2018 to 21 LTP period. Yeah.
Excellent. Like they haven't got other things to be doing. Yeah. Righto. All good. Thank you for the clarification, Jamie. Jenna.
I'll take the report as read. I've got nothing further to add.
Right. It is open for discussion, moving, seconding, or questions. Anything?
It's relatively straightforward, I thought.
I'm happy to take a mover.
I guess there'll be some way that we identify, you must have identified them already, the affected property owners, which must be pretty limited. So don't see any issue with it at all. Councillor Maori is indicating.
Okay, thank you. So you're happy to move. Thank you. Councillor Maori.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think I've got a big issue with this, but surely the Stopbank protects foremost the property that's right adjoining the Stopbank. So isn't there already benefits from the Stopbank being there on the adjoining properties? I just find that up to $20,000, the different landowners and the process that you do to assess it probably costs more for the process than the reward to the landowner at $400 to $1,500 a year. It seems a little bit immaterial to me.
Jenna.
Sorry, can you please just repeat the question? I want to make sure I answer properly.
It appears to me that if you have a Stopbank right adjoining your property, then the protection to your property is foremost from the Stopbank. So by removing that in any flood, you would be most at risk by there not being a Stopbank. So the Stopbank itself provides a big benefit to the land that it's on. And then the cost to administer such a small amount of money, I just question the value to the landowners in terms of that.
Okay, that's a good question. No one can argue that they benefit more so or immediately benefit, definitely. But though the stop banks are a very big asset for Motueka. And what we are trying to encourage is the right behaviour in the interest of the community. And what is interesting is that those property owners make their own assessment of what risk they think they're exposed to, and what practices might be appropriate for them and their land. And so what this is trying to do is not a stick, it's a carrot, which is in the interest of the community, and the resilience is incentivise protection of those critical assets. So it is one of our tools. And I should also say, in terms of the administrative burden, really conscious of that. So we've designed this to be very simplistic.
Just one last question. A bag of carrots is almost $100 and might be by the end of next year. Is the carrot big enough to incentivize? Because that's the rate. My challenge is the policy, I guess, first, but then the carrot and the reward. I can't imagine any landowner even filling a form in for $100 carrot reward.
It's all a balancing act. So yes, again, aware of that, and that's one of those things you have to weigh up how much you could lift the proxy amount that you fund. I guess part of the thing I was thinking is when we prepared this is the value of consultation with those landowners. Like when we go through this process, we'll get feedback. They're likely to say whether they're interested or not, and then you can consider that feedback and what you might do with a final policy.
If the Mayor allows, I got one last thing. So that could this open up that we get overwhelmingly feedback from landowners that say, love the concept, love the policy, but actually we're talking $3,000.
That's exactly my question. Exactly. The risk of people saying, yeah, no, we love the policy. Yeah. We just think your figure's like way light. Yeah.
People can say whatever they like. So anything is possible. What I would say is we did seek advice on what you could use that land for if they had alternatives. What are they likely to get if they were to continue to run cattle on it? Those sorts of things. So this is where I think we've recommended the right balance to you, which is weighing up those trade-offs around the opportunity costs that they've lost. So this is designed so that they are no worse off, and hopefully we benefit from improved resilience.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mr. Kirby.
I'm just going to add to Jenna's comments. The whole discussion around this is a public bit of infrastructure on a private bit of land. Now that land's going to have it, but also the rest of the community does too. So if it was exclusively for the land, then fair enough, they pay it. But this is a public bit of infrastructure on a private property that not only affects that property, but the whole of the town.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kinnemont.
So it's going to affect a small amount of adjoining landowners by the sound of things. My question is, what do other regional authorities do in this area here? Because I really like what we're doing here, a carrot, but I agree with my best buddy over here that $100 is not even getting out of bed for. So what other councils are doing this?
They own the land. We don't. Councils, our preference would be to own the land.
With policy here, is there any other councils doing a similar sort of policy, or is this brand new to Tasman District Council?
I'm not aware of another policy.
So, and the basis for that is you are unaware of a situation where a significant public asset such as Stopbank is sitting on private land. And hence, and even in our region, the Waimea stop banks are on our land. So at the time they were built, the council of the day purchased the land and the associated land inside the stop bank. So in Waimea, we own the stop bank and all the land inside the stop bank. In Motueka, for a whole range of reasons at the time, the stop banks were built on the landowner's land with their permission, but the land either under it or inside it was never transferred. And so hence people still operate and graze and have activities inside the stop banks and outside the stop banks and cross over the stop banks because they still own the land both on one side and inside and under, hence the conversation. And this was never intended to be like a full compensation for the fact they're there. It's a recognition, as Mr. Kirby pointed out, that there is a public asset sitting on private land and there is an opportunity cost to them for that. And it's a recognition of the fact they still own it. Okay, Councillor Hill. Okay, splendid. Anything further? Is someone prepared to second? Councillor Butler.
Prepared to second. I'm just thinking about, we've got a private stop bank on private land, which is our only stop bank. So whether or not the owner's going to come and want to.
So we've got a private stop bank on.
Not consented. On private land.
Oh, so private on private. Yeah, that's
which
not.
is the only thing between
I know exactly
Township and the Taka River.
I know exactly which one you're talking about. We prefer not to open that particular can.
I'm prepared to second.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, just a question about the, I'll get the word right, eligible land, private landowner. So obviously a lot of the land over there is leased. I do know one leasee that was asked to fence off the stop bank because he grazes sheep under his apple trees each year to keep the grass down, etc. So he's protecting the stop bank from the stock. But he doesn't own the land. So the landowner would apply for the subsidy and get it, and he doesn't get compensated for it, or what?
A private agreement between the landowner and the lessee. That's not council's place. Sorry, that's my advice.
Yeah. So this conversation will be with the underlying landowners, of which there are a range along the different sections of the stop bank. Okay, thank you.
I just had one question.
You may.
Just in relation to the policy, Jenna, so there'll be a one-off payment initially when it's all approved, and then when it's reviewed for yearly intervals, they'll get paid for 3 years then? Is that correct, as I read the policy?
The intention is to make the payment annually, but again, in the interest of keeping administrative burden down, to not be reviewing it every year and to not pin it to CPI as well, because those grazing costs and things move differently to what CPI might.
So the payments will be annually, but the review will be 3 yearly. I just read to me like it was after the first one you reviewed and 3 yearly payments. I guess it was a small amount, you could opt for that anyway, couldn't you?
It is a draft policy, so you can consider those.
Well, then I'm happy to forego whatever requirements.
Well, you kind of had it anyway. All right. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Next up, we have the Chief Executive's report. No, you can, your report, you can introduce it.
Introducing my report, which I'll take as read.
Okay, splendid. So I'm detecting a pattern here. It's good. Keep us moving along. So open for questions, feedback, or moving and seconding. Councillor Mailing.
I see Auckland still making people redundant, and we recently recruited a senior consent planner. Will we be trying to steal more from them? Because it seems like a good place.
Through the chair, always.
Anything further, or do you happen to move the receipt of the report?
I certainly am.
Thank you. Move Councillor Mailing. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ellis. I'll put the resolution. Councillor Hill.
Just appreciating your leadership, really, Janine. There's a lot going on, and I was thinking about this morning, and there's tension people come in, you know, upset and there's a whole bunch of people and trying to manage it and, you know, puts pressure on staff, puts pressure on you. And I was thinking about the, all the things you're managing on every day. And I just so appreciate that you've got you at the helm and that you, you know, you take the considered approach you do. I know there's a lot of pressure on. So I highly value you being there and the way that you assist us to be able to have the roles that we have and, you know, work through the program of work that we do. Yeah.
You may.
Thank you. That means a lot. I have to say, it's as you all know, it's a team effort, and I'm just fortunate to have a brilliant team. We are fortunate to have a brilliant team, and I also, you know, I mean, this morning was difficult, but most times I'm saying to myself how fortunate we are as a staff group to have the council we have as well. So I you know, want to acknowledge that back really.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Murray.
Yes, I just wanted to drag it on another 5 minutes, but
yes.
Since we enjoyed some great scones and feeling dinner, I'd just like to pick up and go, well done on your appointment of Renee. So that's pretty awesome.
Anything further? Yeah, I'd just like to, again, formally, I know we informally thank Jenna for her work in the morning tea break, but I think it's just worth formally recognising in the council meeting as well our appreciation for all the time, effort, energy that she's put in over the period since 2013 and previously in her role with Montgomery Watson Mahaza back in the day. And wish you best of luck with your future endeavours working in your role for Ngāti Tama. So yeah, just get that on a record for our appreciation from the council as a whole. And just to continue the thing, it is an incredibly challenging environment to work in at the moment. And as an organisation, obviously represented at the top by Janine and in the meetings that we see every day, the group of staff that appear in front of us, but don't underestimate the amount of stress and challenge that exists right across the board. And it's reflected both inside here and outside. And it's the combination of the community, which is under pressure, they got stresses, they got all their issues. Those are just the same. The people in the building are just members of the community. They have all those other issues, just like everybody else who gets up, goes to work, has families, has kids, you know, school, parents, all those issues. So they're no different just because they walk into this building and undertake a job for us, which comes with another layer of stress managing all those tensions. So I think Chris's points were very well made. And I think we just have to constantly remind ourselves that it's us. I mean, we're under stress, we're under pressure, the organisation and the individuals within it are, and so are many people in the community. And that makes the role that we all play and how we play it, crucially. So just how we play it and how we choose to exercise our part of the overall kind of team, absolutely important. So I think just a good point to note. All right, thank you very much. Moved and seconded. I'll put the receipt of the CEO's report. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Machinery resolutions. Someone like to move the receipt of those. Seconded. Councillor McKenzie. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. And then lastly, Councillor Kinnermont.
Are we still on machinery resolution?
Yes, but they are by definition machinery. But do you have a question?
Yeah, page 26. Got the TDC contribution of 1/3 of the freshwater policy planner of 30K. Yet the total amount is 172,000. Of which the TDC share is 65,000. The figures are confusing for me. Is our share 65,000 or 30,000?
Do you have a page name? Yeah. No, that's not part of the machinery resolutions, I don't think, is it? Yeah, yeah. Right. Okay, so we'll move back to the next item, which is the Mayor's report, which I'm also happy to take as read. If there are any questions, queries, feedback or updates. Councillor Hill.
Thanks, Mayor Tim. Is this an appropriate place to hear from you around your role and what's happening with the reform sort of work when you
It is slightly tricky because in that role I've had to sign various NDAs because to be involved in it is slightly tricky. What I will say is in terms of the RM work, which is around implementation, so it's not a role where I'm offering an opinion on the merits or otherwise of the legislative framework that's been produced by the government, but it's more about how, given the framework that they've arrived at, implementation, and there is a bit of crossover, obviously, you can't avoid kind of discussing the ins and outs, and also the opportunity to input to future legislative processes, particularly around the climate adaptation legislation. So I think, look, I've found it actually quite an interesting role to park your view of the merits or otherwise, when given my, your political kind of views. So it's been quite a good discipline to just focus on how best to implement it. I actually have found MFE really good to deal with. I think they're very constructive. They're very open to hearing feedback around the practicalities of implementing it. And again, as civil servants, they are also responsible for implementing it, whether or not they agree with the specifics that are contained within it. I would draw a stark distinction between that approach and the Three Waters approach that, is the other major reform that has been undertaken. And I think that the MFE process has been substantially more inclusive of those who are ultimately going to be responsible for putting it in place. So it's been very good. The other thing I think I would note from that whole reform program is if you think those other two things are challenging, the climate adaptation bill, and if you look at the current documents that are on MFE's website, notably the report from the Select Committee inquiry, 200 odd pages, but the challenges around land ownership, the fundamentals of land ownership and what the government can or can't require you to do, where you might have to move to or not, the role of banks and insurance and all the challenges that are going to come with what is now being called community-led relocation as opposed to managed retreat are enormous. And I'm just going to add again, as we've just discussed about the stresses in the community, within the building, between and across everyone who's involved in trying to wrangle that is going to be difficult, particularly if you think how difficult it is post-event to have a discussion with the community when actually something's been destroyed, flooded, or how much more difficult it will be if you're trying to preempt something that may happen at some point in the future. And having a conversation about, do you move? If you do, where to? The compensation conversations, how you treat people fairly and equitably, or do you? So I think in terms of background reading for those who are looking forward to something, more challenging, if you want to take your mind off the current challenges, I'm not recommending it as positive reading necessarily, but I think it does highlight just how difficult those conversations are going to be. And the more you get into the detail and the closer it comes to an actual conversation that involves actual people and actual property and actual decisions, the more difficult it'll become. That's right. Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Butler, Councillor Shan. Oh my goodness. Yep, shoot.
It just highlights the importance of actually preempting and not not letting people build right by the coast because people are still they're still wanting to build. They're still asking for permits. Like there's a section in Collingwood on Beach Road that I'd say is just about below sea level, but it's for sale. And, you know, someone's going to want to build there. So we've just got to, you know, try and start now and not continue to build batches or holiday houses right on the sea.
That's certainly one view.
I'm just wondering what you did.
Councillor Mackenzie, then Councillor Shellcrest.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good to see your highlight for the month was the reading exercise.
Oh yeah, I must go to the kindergarten more often.
Just two things I just wanted to follow up from the public forum, if it's appropriate to do that now under your report, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, the lovely model we've got here from Mr. Jones. I'm just mindful of the effort that's actually gone into that and what will happen with it, or
well, that is an excellent question, but my expectation is that we at the very least will photograph it, preserve it somewhere, and provide it as a part of the feedback into the whole process around the roading options. So it's actually quite kind of the most useful thing I've seen, notwithstanding whether it's ideal or not, to give some physical demonstration, because it's actually a bit hard to explain to people what a hope bypass even means.
Yeah, I just feel that it would to acknowledge it in some way, shape or form. Yep. And then I guess the other one is Mr. Dawson has asked this question in terms of legal access across the land. And I think you did say to Mr. Dawson that it would be, replied to, but it would be interesting to copy that maybe into, if we could get that information as well.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So I think that was will be on the actions coming out of the meeting. All right. Anything?
Just like Chris was talking about before with Janine, I think I'd like to acknowledge the same with Tim, obviously being new here and just having to deal with some stuff myself. It's been good, you know, having you here, and appreciate what you do in the role we're in. So
thank you. I appreciate it, particularly on days like today. I do feel that sometimes I actually earn my coin. Today's been one of them. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Anything further? If not, I'll move the receipt of my report. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hill, thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. I think that's all, the inclusion of the open. Someone move that we go into move Councillor Bryant, second Councillor Kinnemont.
Before we go somewhere other today, I'd like to talk about a freshwater policy planner and discrepancies and some funding thereof.
I will close with karakia. Kia horo te marino, kia whakapapa panamu te moana, aroha atu, aroha mai, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou katoa.